We kick things off with our main guy thinking back to how life was just a few days ago. The guild was totally packed, but his crazy story actually starts way back in the day. Back when he was just a little kid, a mercenary group snatched him up, and he basically grew up on the battlefield with a sword in his hand before he even knew what was going on. He was still grinding as a mercenary until just recently, and he actually loved that life, just hanging with his squad and taking on missions. He finally rolls into a new town, and as he's wandering the streets, one building totally grabs his attention. He spotted it instantly, the local adventurers guild, the perfect place for him to finally get a fresh start. He's down to just the leather armor on his back and that massive greatsword on his shoulder, and besides his gear, all he's got is... He was down to his last few silver coins and totally hit rock bottom, but the one thing he knew for sure was that he refused to quit. He was not about to end up living on the streets, so he had to make a move fast before he lost his home for good. He stands in front of the massive quest board and realizes there are way more jobs than he ever expected. From hunting monsters to, he's stuck doing nothing but chores, and to him, this legendary guild feels way more like a basic shop that just handles random odd jobs for... He looks down at his tag and realizes that being a bronze rank totally limits the cool missions he can actually sign up for. Plus, being a solo player makes everything way harder, so he's just staring at the board trying to figure out his next move. He can't just pick any job he wants, and even though there's work out there, the only options left are total garbage. Right as he's trying to figure out his next move, a hand suddenly taps his shoulder, and a voice calls out to him. He spins around to see a friendly blonde guy waving him down, asking if he's looking for a job. The stranger says he looks like a total pro with a sword, and figured since he's flying solo, he might be looking for a partner. The blonde adventurer gets right to the point and asks the guy if he's down to join his squad for a job. He says that even though their squad is big enough, they're getting wrecked because they don't have anyone to hold down the front line. He flashes back to his mercenary days, knowing the old him would have shut down an offer like this in a heartbeat. He thinks being a mercenary is just being hired muscle for cash, and even though you're free, you've got zero backup and people will just toss you aside once they're done with you. Since the job is super dangerous, he always makes sure to check out the client and every little detail before he ever says yes to a deal. He's standing there looking totally stressed, realizing his usual pro skills are hitting a massive wall because the blonde guy leans in close as I tell him this group hunt pays way more than any solo job he'd find. His face turns dead serious as he stares ahead, finally figuring it all out. He finally caves and asks what the deal is, making the blonde guy super hyped, thinking he's finally down for it, but it's actually pretty simple. All those rules don't mean a thing when he's this broke. Lulun is all smiles as he gets things started, telling everyone that a brand new member is officially joining the squad today. He makes it clear that the 5 of them right there are the ones who are going to crush this mission together. With a new face joining the squad, Lulun says they should do some quick intros so everyone knows who's who. He starts by introducing Lauren as the new guy who's going to be holding down the front lines right next to him, and Lauren just keeps it chill, saying he's hyped to work with the team. Lulun introduces Naren as his childhood friend, and he tells everyone they're both dreaming of becoming legendary, top-tier adventurers one day. Naren is just a copper rank thief right now, but she's looking totally locked in and serious about the whole thing. Next, Lulun turns her attention to Oxy, the group's copper rank mage who's super quiet and always stays hidden under her hood. Apparently, Oxy and Naren met the exact day they joined the guild, and they've been stuck together like glue ever since. Lulun starts gassing Oxy up, telling Lauren she's so cracked she can cast 3 spells in a single day, but Lauren just stares her down and asks if that's even supposed to be a big deal. Lulun starts to introduce the next person, but someone else at the table totally cuts him off to say their piece first. Lapis raises her hand to introduce herself, and Lulun's totally down, telling her to go for it. She turns to Lauren with a massive smile and tells him she's super happy to meet him. She introduces herself as Lapis, a priestess for the god of knowledge, but she's brand new to the job and basically a total rookie. She looks him straight in the eye and says she's hyped for them to crush this mission together. Lauren just stands there frozen for a second. Then he gives her a quick nod and says, okay. Lulun jumps in to say Lapis has been a total lifesaver since she arrived, even if Lapis admits she can only fire off 2 spells a day. Lauren looks totally unconvinced, like he's literally asking himself if this is even supposed to be a big deal. Lulun points at himself with a cocky smirk, reminding everyone that he's the copper-rank swordsman leading this whole squad. He shoots Lauren a wink and tells him he better remember the name Lulun, because he's definitely gonna be a legendary hero one day. Naren starts gassing him up as the strongest dude alive, and even though Lulun acts all shy, Naren says that being so humble just proves he's a total hero. Lulun figures it's finally time to share his backstory, explaining how he stumbled upon a hero's book back when he was just a kid. Everyone's totally hyped, but Lauren's just sitting there stressing over the team balance since it's basically just him and a whole squad of girls. This is a massive shift from his mercenary days when girls were super rare, and even though they could definitely hold their own, the whole energy was just totally different. He's actually cool with that part. But the real nightmare is something else entirely as he stares down into his drink. The minutes are just dragging on while Lulun and Naren keep yapping, and Lauren is seriously wondering if this conversation is ever going to end. He finally lets out a huge sigh, shuts Lulun up, and asks if they can just get to work and talk about the mission already. Naren totally snaps and goes off on him, telling him to stop killing the vibe right when the story was finally getting hype. Lauren just stares at them, knowing that a group with this many girls is a total magnet for drama, and it's already starting to go down. He feels like he's joined the most annoying squad ever and is totally regretting his life choices, but either way, he's stuck with them. He knows they gotta get moving, because sitting around and yapping isn't gonna make them any money. Lauren leans back and gets straight to the point, telling them they might be doing okay, but he's actually totally starving. He's here for a job, so he tells them to skip the small talk and get straight to work, asking if anyone's got a problem with that. Lulun stops to think for a second, realizes the dude actually has a point, and just straight up admits he's right. He decides to speed things up, telling the squad that since they're all buddies now, it's finally time to get down to business. Naren is totally not feeling it, giving Lulun a massive pouty face and asking if he's actually serious about bringing this guy along. She even points her finger right at Lauren, calling him a shady ex-mercenary who'd do any dirty job for cash and asking if they can even trust a guy like that. Lauren just sits there taking the hits, and he figures her hating on his mercenary past is just par for the course. He stares at his boots during the long silence, knowing that's how people see. He brushes it off and brings up his situation again, reminding them that he's totally broke and absolutely needs this win. Lulun stays quiet while Lauren reminds him he's only there for one specific mission, asking one last time if anything is actually going to stop them from starting. Lulun realizes Lauren is actually making sense, so he agrees with him right away, and he flashes a smirk and tells the crew that since they've finally sized each other up, it's time to get into the real mission details. Naren is totally not having it, crossing her arms with a huge pout and asking Lulun if he's seriously going to let this guy tag along. She turns to the priestess next, asking Lapis if she's down with adding a mercenary to the squad. Lapis stays totally chill and takes a second to think, wondering how she's even supposed to explain what's on her mind. But she doesn't hold back and tells the whole group that bringing him along is actually a pretty solid move. Lauren just watches Naren totally lose it, complaining that this is exactly what happens when sheltered church girls try to understand how mercenaries actually live. Lapis brushes off the comment like it's nothing, placing a hand on her chest as she admits she was totally raised in the church. Plus, she probably has no clue how the whole mercenary life actually works. She flashes a massive, confident grin and tells them she still trusts her gut when it comes to reading people. Lauren makes it crystal clear that he's not sticking around, telling the group he's only here for this one job and they just have to deal with him until it's done. Lulun flashes a grin and says he's actually down for Lauren to join the squad for good, but Lauren stays totally silent and keeps his back turned. The squad sits down to talk shop, and Lulun gets right to the point, telling them their next mission is a massive goblin hunt. He's got to clear out a pack of monsters lurking in a forest 3 days away, but it's honestly just a routine mission. Naren looks totally ticked off by the news, asking if he means Ein Village, and he confirms that's the place. She starts complaining right away, saying this job is way too lame and they should have taken that other awesome request instead. Oxy jumps in and asks Naren if he's talking about that mission to explore the brand new ruins they just found. She shuts that idea down fast, telling Naren there's no way they're getting that gig since the guild only gives the big jobs to teams with way more experience. But then, Naren isn't buying it at all, huffing that if they keep settling for these tiny jobs, they're going to be stuck doing cheap work forever. Lulun stays super positive like always, telling her that if they just crush these small quests and prove they're legit, the guild will definitely start giving them the massive jobs. Lauren gets straight to the point and asks exactly how many goblins they're dealing with for this job, but Lulun just flashes a big, chill grin and admits he's totally clueless. He says their only lead is some villager who spotted them in the woods and booked it, leaving them with... Lauren is totally freaking out, but Lulun just shrugs it off, saying it doesn't matter how many show up since they're still just weak goblins. Lauren looks down at his armored fist, thinking these guys aren't even a real threat anyway. Now that the plan is locked in, Lulun asks if everyone is down to head out tomorrow morning, and the squad. Everyone's on board, so Lulun tells them to pack their bags and meet up at the city's east gate. Lauren checks his pockets and realizes he's down to his last 3 coins, which is barely enough for a bed and some food, so buying medicine is totally out of the question. So he rolls up to the east gate the next morning ready to grind. But he's the only one who actually showed up. He's just leaning against the wall while the guard stares him down, wondering if he seriously showed up way too early. The gate guard shouts over to Lauren, noticing he's a fresh face and asking if he's just in town to find some work. The guard notices Lauren looks like a total zombie and asks if he even slept, and Lauren just quietly admits he's completely wiped out. Lauren tells him he's just waiting for a meeting, and the guard totally agrees that starting this early is the absolute worst for both of them. He says being this exhausted is a total disaster when you've got a massive day of work ahead. The guard just laughs and says they should keep talking to help Lauren shake off that sleepiness. He casually admits he's just looking for a way to kill time since his shift is a total snooze fest. And then he asks if it's her first time in Kaffa, and Lauren suddenly realizes he didn't even know the city's name. The guard is losing his mind that Loren just wandered in by accident, but Loren just brushes it off, saying things got pretty crazy. The guard flexes and tells him he better remember the name, bragging that even if it's not the capital, it's still a top-tier town where the food is fire, the people are actually cool, and it's the one place he can finally call home. The guard asks where Lauren crashed, so Lauren just says he was right around the corner to the right. The guard knows his way around and mentions a sweet shop in this total dump, figuring Lauren probably hid it there once she finished work. The guard brings up home, and it hits Lauren hard when he realizes he's never actually had a place to call his own. His life as a mercenary was basically just him jumping from one war zone to the next like a bird that never lands. He honestly can't imagine staying in one spot forever, but even so, standing there with the guard, he realizes that having a place to call home is actually a pretty sweet deal. The guard suddenly spots someone walking up and asks if that's Lauren's partner finally showing up, and he's just totally... Lauren looks over and makes it clear that this guy is just a temporary partner for this one specific mission. Lulun gives a quick wave as he walks over, and Lauren's honestly shocked he made it there so fast. The guard leans in and tells Lauren straight up that he needs to ditch that group the first chance he gets. The guard keeps yapping, warning Lauren that a squad with a pretty boy leader and a bunch of girls is just asking for trouble, basically telling him. He warns him to watch his back, but Lauren just stares, thinking he's being a total hater instead of giving real advice, but the guard screams for him to give it his all, and Lauren walks away, knowing he just has to finish this one last job before he can finally ditch these people for good. Lulun finally catches up with the squad and asks if he kept them waiting too long, and right at that moment, seeing that everyone's finally ready to roll, he tells the group they better start moving because it's a long 3-day hike to reach Ayin village. Lauren is totally floored and asks why they aren't taking a carriage, but Lulun admits they blew all their cash on gear and are officially broke, so... Lawrence lets out a sigh and suggests they just find a cheap shared ride to hop on, and Lapis is totally down for that plan. Suddenly, a voice asks if they're struggling, and Lauren looks over to see a gloved hand holding out some spare change. It's Lapis, and she's standing there with a massive grin, telling everyone she's got 10 copper coins they can use. He says this is way more than enough to cover the carriage ride to the village and back with no problems at all. Lauren is just frozen, staring at the coins Lapis is holding out, totally blindsided by the offer and not knowing what to think. He's totally speechless, but Lapis tells him to stop being shy because she's just lending him the cash as a huge favor. She knows she can just hit him up for a favor whenever she wants, and she's got a huge grin on her face. She winks and tells him to just see it as a smart investment for the future, but Lauren doesn't even get a chance to say a word. Lulun shouts from across the way, waving everyone over because he finally scored them a ride. He managed to snag a ride on a carriage straight to Ein village for only 5 copper coins. Lapis just smirks up at Lauren, basically telling him to stop overthinking because that's just how it is. And I'm so hyped. Lauren finally caves and agrees to take the cash, and while she's super hyped about it, he looks like he's totally dead inside. With the cash ready and their ride waiting, Lapis cheers that it's finally time for the squad to move out. Lauren's totally stressed out, sighing because he's somehow already broke and in debt before the mission even kicks off. As the squad heads out past the massive city gates, Lauren's already thinking this whole trip is gonna be a total drag since they've got such a long way to go. Inside the carriage, Lulun is looking way happier and tells the squad he's just glad they actually scored a ride, while Naren leans over to the driver and tells him that this ride is a total lifesaver for the whole squad. As the carriage rattles down the long mountain road, Naren won't stop yapping about how walking would have been a total waste of energy. The driver just grins and says it's no big deal since he was already heading home after selling his crops and had plenty of space, but then he asks if they're the ones meant to handle the goblin mess in his village, so he's pushing them to get there as fast as possible, and Lapis gives him a polite thanks, even though she's low-key thinking that if he actually cared about his village, he would have given them a way better discount on the ride. Lulan steps up with total confidence and tells the driver they'll handle the goblins, and while the old man thinks they look like a solid crew, he's still got a bad feeling. Lauren's just sitting there looking totally stressed out because he wanted to get everyone together and make a real plan, but he quickly realizes that's just not gonna happen with this chaotic crew. Lauren helps fix up the carriage cover and asks the driver if it looks okay, and the old guy says it's perfect and thanks him for the help. The squad pulls over to set up camp, and the drivers say if they call it a night now, they'll reach the village by noon tomorrow. He doesn't waste a single second and tells the squad he's hitting the hay first before taking off. Lulun looks over at the squad and asks if they should probably get some sleep too. Naren is totally done whining about being exhausted and her sore butt from the ride, so Lulun steps up and tells Lauren that the two of them are taking charge of the night watch. Lauren's pretty shocked and asks if they're actually going to be partners on guard duty. Lulun just shrugs it off since staying awake is way too tough, so he and Lauren decide to just take turns sleeping. Lauren is totally stunned and asks if he's actually serious about having only one person on watch at a time. He points out that it's just basic logic to have at least 2 people on watch or scouting, especially since, even with soldiers and adventurers keeping the roads safe, they're still camping right in the open where anyone can spot them. Lauren keeps pushing about why they aren't all sharing the watch, but Naren totally snaps and asks if he's got a problem with how they do things. She tells him the boss already made the call, so he needs to shut his mouth and just follow orders like everyone else. Lulun doesn't care about the drama at all and just asks Lauren who's taking the first shift. Lulun heads off to bed and leaves the first watch to Lauren, who promises to wake him up when it's time to switch. Lauren sits by the fire all alone, staring into the flames and letting out a huge sigh as he starts his shift. Suddenly, he hears a creepy sound coming from the tent and stops dead in his tracks to listen. He starts sweating bullets as he finally realizes the absolute nightmare going down back at the camp. Things get way more awkward when high-pitched gasps and moans start coming from the tent for everyone to hear. Lauren is totally losing it because they're standing right out in the open, and hearing 2 different girls' voices is making him freak out. He drops his head into his hands, grumbling that the guys in this party seriously have zero self-control. Lauren's sitting by the fire when he realizes his backup is a total no-show, so he can pretty much kiss his sleep goodbye. He knows he's not getting a wink of sleep tonight, and looking at the empty space around him, he really starts to miss his old mercenary squad. He thinks back to those nights they'd all just chill by the fire, eating and hanging out after a long day of work. They used to promise each other that as long as they survived the next battle, they'd be okay. There was always a chance they'd run into each other again somewhere down the line. Looking back at all that blood and insane fighting, he knows his chances are basically zero, but he's still wishing for it anyway, just so he can see their faces one last time. A voice suddenly asks what's wrong, and he doesn't waste a second before reaching straight for his sword. He whips around ready to throw hands, but it's just Lapis looking totally shocked that she actually scared him. She quickly says sorry, explaining she didn't mean to jump scare him while he was totally spaced out. Lapis flashes a nervous grin and tells Lauren the truth. That noise was actually coming from the tent right next to hers. She couldn't get a single second of sleep because things were so messed up, and Lauren just nods along, totally agreeing that it's a complete disaster. The two of them just sit there in silence for a second, listening to the fire crackle. Lapis brushes her hair back and says she's just going to hang out there until she's actually tired or the neighbors finally finish up. She looks over and asks if he's cool with her hanging out by the fire for a bit. Lauren wonders if all adventurers are this wild, but he figures it makes sense, since they never know if they'll even survive until tomorrow. Lapis looks him right in the eye and says she'd love to tell him that's not how this works, but she admits that this kind of stuff is actually just a totally normal part of their job. She stares into the fire, glad everyone is so hyped, but she really wishes they'd read the room before starting a scene. She points out that since most gods tell people to have tons of kids, some people actually think they're being super holy just by making things happen. Lauren looks her right in the eye and admits she totally didn't see that coming. He thought priests were supposed to be super serious, but after seeing Lapis and her wild healing, he realizes he was totally wrong about them. He looked up at the stars and asked her how many gods are even out there and which one she's actually representing. Lapis explains she serves the god of knowledge and sets him straight, saying, "You don't count gods like regular people, you count them as pillars." Lauren warns her to watch her mouth because some priests out there will go crazy if you say the wrong thing about their gods. He says sorry, and admits he's not exactly book smart since he spent his whole life fighting as a mercenary. Lapis listens closely, and then asks why a guy with his history would even want to be an adventurer. Lauren goes silent for a moment, then just says his mercenary squad is basically gone for good. Lapis says she's sorry for asking, but Lauren just shrugs it off because stuff like this happens every single day in their world. He squeezes his fist and says you win some and you lose some, because this time his old squad just ended up on the wrong side of a total beatdown. Lauren says he could have just joined a different crew and kept being a mercenary, but there was one huge problem. He was way too broke to leave the town he'd run to, so he had to survive using the only thing he had left, his insane strength. Lapis nods like she finally gets the vibe, confirming his name is Lauren and admitting he looks like he can definitely hold his own. She looks down at the massive sword and asks if the blade is seriously as wide as her waist. Lauren's standing behind this massive hunk of iron, and honestly, this weapon is such a beast that it towers over almost everything else. Lapis is straight up shocked he can even lift that massive sword, but Lauren reminds her that in a real fight, you can't always count on having both hands free. He reveals he's actually trained to swing that thing with just one hand, and he can do it just as easily with his left or his right. Lauren looks her dead in the eye and asks if she really wants to see if this blade is wider than her waist. Lapis doesn't flinch at all. She just smirks and says she's totally down for that. Lauren grips the hilt with a look of total doubt, asking if they're seriously going through with this. Lapis stands right next to the massive sword to show the size difference, grinning as she asks how she looks and pointing out she's way thinner than the blade. Lauren just gives her that classic serious look before finally giving in and admitting she's definitely thin. Lapis tries to say more, but Lauren shuts her down, claiming there's no doubt his weapon is way thicker than she is. Lapis keeps nodding like it's totally obvious, but then Lauren points out that her backside is actually way thicker than the sword. That shuts down the argument, and as Lauren looks over his shoulder, he sees the sky is finally starting to get bright. Lapis realizes he's totally right, and says she was so into their talk that she didn't even notice the sun was already coming up. Lawrence kicks back by the fire and apologizes for keeping her up all night, figuring a priestess wouldn't care about his old mercenary stories, but Lapis shuts him down and says she was actually super into it, and Lauren's just glad to hear that. It's getting super cold, so Lauren tells everyone to get ready to head out, and Lapis agrees right as the rest of the squad starts waking up inside the tent. Lulan crawls out looking totally wrecked and asks why the sun is already up, completely confused about what happened to their guard shifts. Lulun finally wakes up and asks Lorne why nobody called him for his shift, but Lorne just brushes it off and tells him not to sweat it since it's already over. The old driver sees everyone finally getting ready and tells them to scarf down their food so they can hit the road, since the village is right around the corner. Lauren stares at the cold ashes of the fire and realizes he's totally broke, swearing that as soon as this job is over, he's gonna find a way to make some serious cash. The wagon finally rolls to a stop, and the driver shouts out that they've officially made it to Iron Village. Lapis takes one look at the massive wall of trees and realizes the forest is super thick and goes on forever. Lauren's totally on board since she's sure that's exactly where all those goblins have been coming from lately. Yellorin wants to find out where the monsters were last spotted before they start the hunt, but Lulun is already getting super hyped up and he screams at the whole squad to just charge into the woods right this second. Lauren shuts him down by shoving her hand in his face, telling the kid to wait up since they've got other stuff to take care of first. He reminds them that since the village asked for help, they've got to go talk to the locals before they start the hunt. Lauren stops the squad and tells them they have to hit up the village chief first to get the full story on what's going down. He gives them the scoop on the mission before they rush out, explaining that knowing exactly where the enemies are and how many they're up against is the only way to make a solid plan. Plus, ignoring the guy who hired them is a total jerk move, but Naren doesn't care and just snaps back that he's being super annoying. She thinks it's a total breeze since they're just clearing out some goblins, but she's being way too overconfident. He's totally over it, telling them to just leave a message with the driver and asking why they're wasting so much time on such an easy hunt. Lauren gets dead serious and tells her to stop acting like she's too good for the work, asking who she thinks is really being. He calls her out for being totally unprofessional, saying even those mercenaries she hates actually have enough sense to show a client some respect. The village chief finally jumps in to chill everyone out, saying he'll handle the intros as long as they get to work right away. Sarf gives Naren a quick head pat to calm her down, but she just grumbles his name, looking totally annoyed. Now that the arguing is over, Lauren takes charge and tells the squad he's leading the way from the very front. Lulun starts barking out the plan, telling Naren to cover him while Oxy and Lapis take the middle, and he has Lauren stay all the way in the back to keep an eye out for. He's basically looking for a fight and acting like he's totally in charge, flashing a grin and saying they should just wrap this up fast so the villagers can finally chill, and he points right at the trees and tells the crew it's finally time to head into the forest. Naren follows behind, grumbling that they should just ditch that annoying mercenary since they're strong enough on their own, but Oxy looks back and reminds her that Lauren is the one who has to be their shield when the fighting starts. And honestly, they don't really have a choice about him. With him tagging along, Lapis keeps the vibes high and promises she'll have her healing magic ready the very second anyone gets hurt. Naren's not having it at all, telling her she's wasting her power and needs to save it for when Sarf actually gets hurt. But Lauren just gives him a totally exhausted reply and the chief tells them to stay safe as they head out, but the squad dives into the woods without a single clue about the goblins waiting for them. They're supposed to be hunting, but since they totally ignored Lauren's advice, they're just wandering through this massive forest for nothing until the boredom finally kicks in, so Naren tries to get Sarf's attention while they keep pushing through the thick trees. Lulans notices something off to the side and points it out, telling the squad he found some raspberries nearby, and then Aaron's totally down and says they haven't had fresh berries in forever, so they're definitely stopping to grab some. Even Oxy gets totally sidetracked, dropping to her knees to check out the moonlit grass and fox bamboo, completely shocked that all these top-tier materials are just lying around. Lapis starts freaking out when she sees everyone losing their cool, so she speaks up and asks if they should be focusing on the goblin hunt instead. She's just trying to collect snacks and plants, but everyone totally blanks her, leaving her feeling super bummed while the group just does their own thing. Lauren stares at the total disaster and mutters that they've completely blanked on the goblins, knowing they're just wandering through this massive forest with zero plan, so Lapis turns to him, sounding totally desperate as she asks if they're really just gonna let this group get away with acting like that. Lauren just crosses his arms and tells her she's on her own, while Lapis sighs, wishing the goblins would just hurry up and find them already. She looks at Lauren and says it looks like he finally gave up on them too, then asks if he's still low-key trying to make things work. Lauren looks away, admitting he's totally losing his drive now that this whole job has turned into a complete circus. Lapis looks Lauren in the eye and tells him he's actually super impressed by how chill he's being through all this, but she immediately snaps back, telling him she actually hates it when he calls her that. Lauren sounds super awkward when he tries calling her Lapis-san, so she tells him to just use Lapis, even though she's confused why he's acting so shy about. Lauren confesses he's basically never had the chance to call a girl by her first name before, so he looks back and tells her she can totally just call him Lauren if that makes things easier for her. Lapis gets all fired up and insists she's going to keep calling him Lawrence from now on. She starts waving her hands around in a total panic, swearing she's not being cold and that's just how she normally talks. Lauren just gives her a little smile and tells her to call her whatever name is easiest to say. Lapis lights up instantly and flashes a big smile, totally down to keep calling him Lauren-san. Deep in the pitch-black woods, creepy glowing eyes start popping up behind the bushes. Lapis catches Lawrence acting super weird and asks him what's going on, but he's totally keeping quiet. But Naren suddenly ducks down and tells everyone to freeze because she definitely heard something. Lawrence's face goes totally serious the second he realizes they're about to get wrecked. He starts grabbing for his massive sword while Lapis just stands there looking totally freaked out. Lulun is still acting super chill with a snack in his hand, asking if that thing is just some random monster. Naran keeps looking all over the place, totally sure she just heard someone's voice right nearby. Before she can even finish, an arrow zooms out of the trees and slams right into Oxy's shoulder. Naren screams for Oxy as a mob of goblins charges out of the forest and catches them totally off guard. The group is caught totally off guard, but Lauren snaps at them to keep their eyes on the enemies right in front of their faces. Lauren swings his sword in one massive arc, clearing out everyone standing in his way. Lapis looks totally stressed out and asks if he needs her to cast a shield spell, but Lauren shuts her down right away, telling her he's not looking for any of that right now. He stays totally locked in, slicing right through a goblin with one massive swing while he keeps moving. He's scanning the tree line, trying to see if that archer is hiding somewhere in the bushes. Lauren realizes he's at the totally wrong distance for his massive sword and wishes he had a dagger to throw, but another arrow whizzes right past his head, but he doesn't stop and keeps charging through the madness. A goblin shrieks nearby, and Lauren's already complaining to himself that his last hit didn't go deep enough. Lulun screams at the goblins as they start to bolt, asking if they seriously think they're getting away that easy. He screams that there's no way he's letting them get away and orders everyone to start the hunt. Lauren walks through the grass and admits he knows his word doesn't carry much weight, but he wonders if they should stop before they get in too deep. But Lulun shuts him down instantly and reminds him that these guys are here to wipe everyone out, and he screams that the mission isn't over until every single nest is destroyed. Naren jumps in to have his back and gets right in Lauren's face, asking why a simple mercenary is acting like she's such a big deal. Before she bolts, she screams that the leader's word is law, and he needs to just shut up and follow. Lauren watches them leave, looking totally ticked off, knowing for a fact that wrecking the nests was never part of the deal. Lapis walks up and points out that the rest of the group has already totally ditched them. Lauren just nods, looking him right in the face and telling him that as far as she's concerned, she figures staying put is the best move, explaining that since the other guys already have a mage, she's not going anywhere. She sticks right by Lauren's side for safety, but Lauren just gives her a look and asks if she's really sticking with that story. Lapis just gives him a little smirk and says if he wants to see it that way, they can just leave it at that. Lauren spots a trail of dark liquid and points out it's goblin blood, saying it'll be super easy to track them down. While they're walking, Lauren asks Lapis for a reality check on whether this party is actually legit. He's super hyped to see how the leader handles a sword, and there's a big reason why. He knows the deal with these goblins. They're the main target because they multiply with anything and grow up way too fast, but there's a catch. By themselves, these guys are total weaklings that even a normal person could beat up, and they're definitely not the smartest. The real nightmare is how many of them there are, and Lauren knows if you can't wipe them all out in one shot, your plan is the only thing that's going to save you. But honestly, just look at how these guys have been acting lately. They're taking forever to catch on, and now he's starting to think they don't even have a real plan. He turns back to Lapis and asks one more time, how strong is this leader for real? Lapis looks back and asks if he was really a mercenary before all this craziness started. She starts picturing those insane sword moves like Hellfire Dance and Severing Wind, and then she just gives herself a confident nod. She asks him if he's ever heard the crazy stories about that legendary mercenary known as the Sword Ogre. Lauren keeps a totally straight face as he tells her he's at least heard that name before, but the rumors are straight facts. Face him as an enemy and you're done for, but if he's on your team, he'll just steal all the glory, making him the one legend nobody actually wants to see on the battlefield. Lauren looks at her like she's totally lost it, asking if she's seriously comparing their leader to a freakish monster, but Lapis just laughs it off. She tells him that even if you rounded up 10 million guys who were just as skilled as Sark, but honestly they still aren't even close to the Sword Ogre's level. Lauren asks if they've totally lost it for trusting their lives to someone so mid, but Lapis just points out that he's stuck in the exact same mess right now. Lauren doesn't even try to fight it, just saying that being this broke has officially made him lose his mind. Lawrence is totally feeling the pressure, complaining that his neck is so stiff he can barely even budge it. Lapis just smiles through all his complaining, making him ask why she's looking at him like he's a total lost cause. The squad finally makes it to the spot, and Lulun points out a dark hole in the rocks, calling it the Goblin nest. They spot blood trails leading straight into the hole, and Lauren realizes the tunnel is so narrow that only 2 people can squeeze through at once. That totally kills his vibe, and since his massive sword is useless in this tight space, he literally asks if they can just skip the whole thing. Naren's not playing around and tells him to beat it if he wants, but he can kiss his share of the reward goodbye. Lulun tries to keep things chill, telling Lauren it's just a goblin so he'll be totally fine, and she even hands him a backup weapon to help him win. He whips out that short sword he found earlier, even though the blade is all chipped and looks like total trash. Lauren sighs and grabs the trash sword, knowing it's way better than heading into that cave empty-handed. Lulun takes charge and starts calling the shots, telling Oxy to prep a light spell while Neuron scans the area for any danger. The squad is standing right in front of the creepy cave entrance, and since everyone's ready, they decide it's finally time to head inside. Oxy steps up and points her staff, firing off a light spell that makes the whole entrance glow like crazy. Lauren is totally over it, asking why they're wasting precious mana on light when they could have just brought some regular lanterns. Naran gives the all-clear on traps, but Sarf reminds them the villagers are still stuck inside and they need to hurry. Lauren's not buying it for a second, knowing there's no way it's this easy, and that they're definitely walking into a trap. He's pretty sure it's a total trap, but he keeps it to himself and tells the squad they might as well head out. Lauren lets out a big sigh and follows the group into the dark, narrow tunnel with his massive sword strapped tight to his back. The squad heads deeper into the cave, and it's so quiet that the only sound is their footsteps echoing off the wet stone walls. Sarf scans the empty hallway, wondering if the goblins totally panicked and bailed since they didn't even leave a single guard behind. He figures these goblins are way too stupid to plan anything, and Oxy totally agrees, saying they're probably too beat up to even guard the door. Lapis looks around the quiet tunnel and points out that they're moving way too fast. She turns to Lauren to see what he thinks about this whole mess. Lauren stays on high alert, warning the team that the goblins are totally ignoring the guards just to bait them into a trap deeper inside. Lapis is totally shocked and asks if goblins are actually smart enough to plan ahead like that. Lauren says he's no goblin pro, but even a bunch of monkeys are smart enough to use a lookout, so he knows something is definitely up. Lapis gets curious and asks if he really thinks goblins are way more advanced than monkeys. She totally nerds out about how smart animals are, pointing out that monkeys use tools and build societies just like we do. Lauren just stares at her, wondering why she's stressing over random facts, but he figures that's just how these priestesses of knowledge are. Their talk gets cut short when Sarf suddenly freezes right in his tracks. Lapis catches the vibe shift and asks if he spotted something waiting for them up ahead. Sarf squints into the shadows and spots a weird light that looks just like a room up ahead. Lauren realizes right then that if they can see light, the enemies already know they're coming. Naren's worried they're walking straight into a goblin trap, and Oxy knows those archers are going to be a total nightmare to deal with. Sarf steps up and says he'll take the lead, charging straight in to block the arrows while the rest of the squad covers him. Lauren stands there with his arms crossed, low-key impressed that this guy actually has the guts to charge straight into an ambush down such a narrow path. Oxy calls the plan a total suicide mission, but she's still gonna use her shield magic to give them a fighting chance. She warns him she only gets 3 shots a day, but Sarf doesn't care, and tells her to just blast it anyway. Lapis catches the look on Lauren's face and calls him out for being totally over the plan. Lauren just stands there with that massive sword on his back, wondering how they're even going to pull this off. Lapis gets curious and asks what kind of move he'd pull if he was the one in charge. Lauren jumps in and warns the group that they better not even think about using fresh wood for a fire at the cave entrance. Sarf explains that the easiest way to clear a dead-end cave is to trap everyone inside with fire and smoke, but Lapis reminds him they'll need a lot of oil to pull it off. Sarf just shrugs it off, saying green wood won't even burn right, and since they're totally out of flint and oil, they might as well just quit and head home. Lauren hangs his head, thinking about how much it sucks to be broke under a leader like this, and Lapis can totally tell why he's so ticked off. Out of nowhere, Sarf speaks up and calls out Lauren's name. He shouts at him to stop playing it safe and get up to the front line where the real action is. Lauren is totally not feeling it, and reminds them that he's got zero defensive magic protecting him right now. Naren screams at Lauren to just use that massive sword as a shield, and Oxy thinks that's actually a pretty solid plan. Lauren looks at his weapon and realizes there's no way he can swing it in this cramped cave, and trying to use it as a shield would just be a heavy, clunky disaster. Sarf just smirks and says sorry, but they can't blow 2 magic charges at once, so he's going to be the one to back Lauren up. Lauren realizes he's totally stuck with this plan and starts whining about how trash his luck has been lately. So he looks down at his gear, knowing he's just got to find a way to make it work and survive this crazy mess. Sarf doesn't waste a single second and charges straight ahead, screaming at everyone to get out of the way. Lauren's just standing there looking totally dead inside, thinking about how Sarf is being way too loud. Those goblins ahead are already on guard, and Lauren knows that screaming like a total psycho just blew their cover. A ton of arrows come flying right at them, but they all just bounce off Sarf's magic shield like it's nothing. Lauren's watching closely and realizes that even though Sarf isn't even trying to block, those arrows just can't touch him. He finally realizes how much magic can save his skin in a mess like this, and right then, Sarf gets even more fired up, yelling for the squad to keep pushing and end this fight right now. He launches himself into the sky and dives straight at the Goblin squad to finally kick off the real fight. The ground literally snaps under Sarf's weight, and he lets out a painful groan as he starts to fall. He slams face first into the dirt, totally lost on what just went down. Naran's watching the whole thing go down, screaming at him to get back on his feet. Lauren sees the whole crew about to charge in and tries to hold them back, but he moves fast, grabbing Lapis by the back of her shirt and telling her to hold up while she lets out a little yelp. He literally yanks her off the ground to stop her in her tracks, and she lets out this super weird choking sound. Over at the pit, Naren's on his knees screaming for Sarf to wake up, but Sarf is so out of it he can barely even move. Lapis spots hidden traps all over the floor, so Lauren warns the crew to watch their step before someone gets hurt. A massive swarm of goblins starts flooding out of the cave right in front of them, and it's clear they're in big trouble. This was definitely no accident, and Lauren realizes a genius is pulling the strings, meaning they're all in major trouble. Sarf finds an old journal in the library and his mind is totally blown, saying these records are insane and he can't believe people this cool actually exist. He's just chilling on the floor buried in books, calling the guy he's reading about a total hero. He stares at the pictures and says he wants to be just like them, dreaming of going on wild adventures and making a massive name for himself. He strikes a pose and screams that he's going to be a legendary hero everyone looks up to, with Naren hyping him up. But jumping back to the present, the whole vibe just flipped, and Naren is losing it, screaming that this shouldn't be happening while Sarf stands behind her looking totally crushed. Everything goes south real quick when Neuron screams, and Sarf panics while trying to reach out, but then something crazy happens. Out of nowhere, an arrow flies in and slams right into his chest, making him scream his lungs out. He's staring ahead in total shock, barely able to believe how bad his luck really is. He's totally losing his mind because they're getting absolutely crushed, especially since it was only supposed to be a few weak goblins, but now the whole pack is closing in with their weapons ready. Lauren hangs back and keeps his eyes peeled, wondering if that super strong guy he saw earlier is actually the one pulling all the strings. Lauren stares at the leader and says it's way bigger than the rest, but there's something way more dangerous about it than just its size. Lapis says some of these things are just born built different, or they end up totally changing as they go. She says that once a goblin levels up enough, it can mutate into a total freak that's way more dangerous than the rest of them. She takes one look at that staff and gear and realizes they're up against a goblin magician. Since it can use magic and is actually smart, this thing is easily one of the deadliest high-tier threats around. Lauren warns they're totally cooked without a plan and wants to bail, but Lapis is way too worried about Sarf and the rest of the crew to run. The guys are already wiped out, sitting in a pile of arrows while Lulun just sighs at what a total mess they made. Lauren hears something creeping in the shadows and realizes they're in massive trouble. He screams that they're getting jumped from behind too, and Oxy starts freaking out because their only escape route is completely shut. Lapis looks totally grossed out that these basic goblins are actually smart enough to pull off a pincer attack. Oxy holds up her glowing staff and screams for the sand to fly out and put everyone to sleep. She lets her magic loose, blasting a massive wave of energy right into the middle of those monsters. But the goblin magician is totally ready, holding up this weird glowing stone. A massive flash of light explodes through the cave, turning everything completely white. Lauren blocks the blinding flash, wondering what the heck is up with that crazy light. As the light fades away, he looks over and sees Lapis has totally collapsed on the ground. He asks her what's wrong, trying to figure out what the heck just happened to her. She looks completely wiped out, staring up and saying she can't believe this is actually going down. Lauren whips her head back to the front as someone screams, completely losing their mind at what they're seeing. The goblins are still standing and closing in, and Oxy starts freaking out because her spell didn't take down a single one of them. The whole squad starts backing up in a total panic as the goblins close in, and Oxy is just screaming at the monsters to stay away. Lulun totally snaps and screams at the goblin leader to get the hell away from the girls. The goblin doesn't care and takes a massive swing straight for Lulun's head. Lulun stands there frozen, blood dripping down as he realizes his dream of being a legend is totally falling apart. Everything hits the fan when a goblin yanks Oxy by her hair and another one snatches up Neuron, leaving them both screaming for help. As his vision goes dark, Lulun watches the monsters swarm him, thinking about how he was totally supposed to be the hero. Lauren watches the disaster from the sidelines and realizes those guys are basically goners at this point. He looks around and realizes the rest of the pack has completely cut off their only way out. He grabs Lapis to keep her steady and asks if she's seriously still stuck and can't move her legs. He leans in close, asking what's going on and if her body has finally just quit on her. Lauren realizes things are going south fast, and with enemies closing in from behind, he knows they're totally trapped if they don't move right now. Lapis just stares up at him while he's sweating buckets, desperately trying to come up with a plan because he's honestly got no clue what to do next. Lapis suddenly tells him they're out of options and he needs to just leave her behind and run. Lauren realizes her voice sounds totally different as she tells him she's just dead weight, and he could actually escape if he was on his own. She looks down and tells him straight up that the goblins might spare the girls for now, but a guy like him is definitely toast. She tells him to just leave her behind and save his own skin, but Lauren just gives a quick reply and starts reaching right for his back. Lapis is just sitting there totally beaten, and while she's down, he turns away to grab the handle of that massive sword. Lapis is totally lost and tries to speak up, but Lauren just shuts her down and tells her to keep her mouth shut. He gives her one last warning to stay sharp, or she's going to end up biting her tongue while he handles this. Lapis shuts her eyes and puts a hand over her heart, saying she finally realized that being right next to Lauren is the best spot for her. She gets totally fired up and balls her fists, telling him straight up that she's never leaving his side. She winks with a big smile and holds up one finger, telling him that if she does him a solid right now, who knows, maybe he'll be the one coming to her rescue later on. Lauren just sighs and scoops her up like a sack of potatoes, telling her to hold on tight because things are about to get crazy. He heads toward the light, knowing he's basically betting his whole life on this one shot. He pulls out his giant sword with a look of total focus, yelling that they've finally got the GOAT for it, and the goblins blocking the path start screeching and aim their bows right at them. Arrows come zooming right at them, but Lauren is way too quick and dives straight into the chaos. He grips Lapis tight and smashes right through the first wave of enemies, refusing to slow down for even a second. Lapis is getting tossed around like a rag doll and groaning, but she's telling herself she just has to hold on. Lauren sees her path back is totally blocked, so she's got no choice but to charge straight through the front. This goblin mage is standing guard right in front of the only exit tunnel left. Lauren locks in and screams he's diving straight for it, but right as he makes his move, the mage unleashes a massive blast of fire that tears right through the air. Lawrence sees the fireball and realizes it's zooming way faster than he thought, so he just ducks his head and charges straight at that hooded monster anyway. The goblin points his finger to fire another spell, but Lauren screams that he's way too slow, so he just guns it and takes a massive leap to clear the gap. He pulls Lapis in close and bolts toward the light at the end of the hall. Lapis is barely holding on and tells Lauren he should just drop whatever he's carrying, but she groans as they keep moving. But Lauren tells her to stay quiet and save her energy while he keeps pushing forward, knowing they barely survived, and he's desperate to get far away before more goblins show up. But then, suddenly it hits him that even though he had no other choice, he just sprinted way deeper into the cave, going the complete opposite direction of the exit. Lauren keeps her speed up, but she's starting to wonder if running deeper into the shadows is actually a huge mistake. He knows there's no turning back now, so he's just praying he finds another way out somewhere up ahead. If they can't pull this off, both of them are in huge trouble. Yaloren's hauling it through the tunnel, muttering about how this job is way more of a headache than he signed up for. Lapis is blown away by how fast he's sprinting through the pitch black, but Lauren just tells her to shut up and let him focus. She starts whining that being carried like a sack of potatoes is boring, so Lauren totally snaps and tells her to shut up because he's literally fighting to stay alive. Lapis knows Lauren is right about the danger, but she's still not vibing with what's going on. She finally speaks up and tells them they need to try a totally different plan. Lapis is totally shocked and asks if he's using magic, but Lauren just wants to know if she can finally see the path now that it's glowing. She snaps at him to quit dragging her around like she's just some piece of gear, so Lapis makes it clear she's not asking for anything wild, like a total Princess Carrie or anything. She figures the least he could do is give her a piggyback ride to make things way more chill. She pauses for a second and asks him what he thinks about the switch. Lauren's totally down and says they'll move way faster this way as she hops right onto his back. While they keep pushing through the darkness, Olympus starts telling him something else. She leans in close and gives him a real, honest thank you for saving her back there. Lauren hears her voice snap back to normal and starts overthinking why it keeps changing in the first place. Lapis leans in and gets totally serious, asking him why he even bothered to save her. She calls him out for leaving the whole squad to die just so he could come back and save her specifically. Lauren plays it off like it's nothing, claiming she just got lucky and reminding him he still owes her for that copper coin. He tells her to just pick whatever reason she likes and leave it at that, but Lapis asks if she can just believe he's a good person, but he shuts her down instantly, saying a nice guy wouldn't have ditched his own team. She doesn't even care, and tells him that since he saved her life, she's always gonna see him as a hero. Lauren tells her she can do whatever she wants, so she just flashes him a massive grin while hanging onto his back. They keep pushing through the pitch black, but after a while, Lauren brings up that conversation they were just having. He asks her about that super polite way she was talking earlier, wondering if that's actually the real her. Lauren keeps lugging Lapis along, but he calls her out, asking if there's a real reason her body just totally froze up on her back there. Lapis looks away, looking totally stressed out as she tells him she really shouldn't be talking about this. Lauren tells her he's not going to force the truth out of her, but he's definitely not letting it go that easily. He says everything would go way smoother if she just came clean so he could finally figure out what they're up against. Lapis stays quiet for a second, but then she finally agrees with him. Since he's already seen way too much, she figures she might as well just spill the whole story. She kicks things off with a question, wondering just how much he actually knows about the race called the demon kind. That question totally catches Lauren off guard, and he just keeps repeating the race's name while his brain tries to figure out why she's even bringing them up. Turns out this world is packed with way more than just humans and demi-humans, and the demons are actually just one of the many groups living there. Let's be real, everyone else thinks these guys are total bad news. Demons are famous for their beastly strength and being total pros at magic, but they honestly don't care about anyone but themselves, so they'll do whatever it takes to win and don't care who gets crushed, which is exactly why everyone sees them as the bad guys. Even with that scary reputation, tons of humans act the exact same way, so it really just depends on the person. Lauren remembers his old mercenary buddy telling him that judging someone just because they're a demon is a total mistake. To make things even worse, every single church hates their guts because they don't even bother believing in gods. The wild thing is they look exactly like regular people, but their eyes are a crazy deep purple. Sure, a demon king pops up every now and then to freak everyone out, but that doesn't mean they're all trying to rule the world. While he's lugging her around, Lapis leans over his shoulder and asks if this is really the kind of race he was picturing. Lauren just stares straight ahead with a dead serious look, asking what the catch is, and then Lapis just smiles and drops the bombshell that she's actually one of them, leaving Lauren totally shook as he asks if she's even for real. Lauren's like, "Hold up, I'm a priest and my eyes aren't even purple," so she's totally off the hook. Lapis straight up says she couldn't care less about gods of love or peace, and she only teamed up with the god of knowledge because they both want the same thing. And since this god's only rule is that you have to keep learning as much as you can, she can use both holy magic and sorcery because her god thinks magic is just another way to gain knowledge. This is a massive deal because following most other gods usually means you can't use magic at all. Lauren finally realizes exactly how she managed to pull off that crazy light spell from before. She finally realizes she's basically doing two jobs at once as both the priest and the mage. He asks if her god's followers can do the same thing, but Lapis says there are barely any who actually can. Seriously, not a single one of them is even on her level. She's acting super cocky, basically saying it's a total no-brainer that demons are way more powerful than any human. Lauren admits she's totally right, because if anyone could use magic and holy arts at the same time, everyone would be rushing to become a priest for her god. So he's left wondering why a demon would even bother being an adventurer in the first place. He says he always figured those demons just stayed hidden deep in the central mountains. These places are supposed to be totally impossible to break into or even escape from. It looks like they only stay away from everyone else because their home is way out in the middle of nowhere. Lapis spills a huge secret, telling him that demons are actually roaming the world all the time without ever getting caught. And while Lauren is totally blown away, but she says they look just like regular people, so if they're careful, everyone just thinks they're super talented, while the ones who look too weird just stay hidden at home. Sometimes they actually nerf their own strength before showing up, and since Lauren is totally confused by that, Lapis tells him that actually explains why she's in this mess. Then she grunts and swings her arm right in front of his face to show him. She shows him her hand and asks if he realizes her body is just a total fake, leaving Lauren shocked that she's already strong enough to lift her arm. Lauren is totally caught off guard by what he's hearing, so he asks her to say that one more time. Lapis drops a total bombshell that her body is a complete lie, and everything from her limbs to her eyes is just some magic she whipped up herself. She tells him she's got to use her own special trick just to get that body moving. She's burning through a ton of energy just to stay awake while he carries her along. Lapis switches gears and asks Lauren if he actually knows why Oxy's magic failed to trigger during the fight. She says a goblin mage probably used a spell called Mana Lost to shut the whole place down. It's basically a massive field that shuts off everyone's magic if they get too close. But a normal goblin is way too weak for that, so she figures they must be using some kind of item to store all their mana. Lauren whips out a weird-looking object and asks if that's the magic tool she's talking about. He hands it over while they're still on the move, and Lapis takes one look, confirming this is totally the item behind the whole trick. Lapis is totally confused why a basic goblin would have something that powerful, but she's just relieved it's not active anymore. She's out of danger for now, but she tells Lauren it's still going to be a long time before she can move her body again. She says they're lucky her eyes still work as they head deeper into the cave. Lauren asks if that's why she wanted him to trash the item earlier, and Lapis says it's totally fine to keep as long as it's switched off. Lauren asks why she's suddenly talking so weird, but she swears it's not because she's a demon. Lapis reveals that the way she's talking right now is actually her totally normal voice. But the second her magic failed and things got deadly, her brain just instantly clicked into total battle mode. Lauren gets that you need to lock in for a fight, but changing your whole personality and voice is honestly just doing way too much. He tells her he's finally figured out exactly what's going down. Lauren just keeps pushing through the dark, her head spinning from how wild everything's been today. Lapis straight up admits that ditching her back there would have been the smartest move, but she's honestly just super glad Lauren ignored logic to carry her all this way, and she makes sure to thank him face to face. She says that even though demons have a bad rep, they're definitely not the type to forget a favor. Lauren just shrugs it off with a chill reply, acting like it's honestly no big deal. He tells her she can just pay him back with a favor somewhere down the road. He points out that this whole deal doesn't even matter if they don't make it out of this cave alive. While they keep walking, Lapis asks if he's noticed how creepy this cave has felt since that goblin attack. He looks back and points out that even after walking a massive distance, they still haven't found a single way out. She thought it was just a normal goblin cave, but Lauren totally agrees that something about this place feels super sketchy. They realize they've already passed a bunch of spots that look like actual rooms the goblins are using. Lauren keeps pushing forward with Lapis on his back, thinking about how they finally left those rooms in the dust. He was totally ready to turn around if they hit a dead end, but this path just keeps going, and the walls are so perfectly even that he realizes this whole cave was actually built by hand. He looks back at Lapis and asks if they should just call it quits and head back. Lapis reminds him that going back is a terrible idea since they'd have to survive that room all over again. Lauren just clicks his tongue, super frustrated because he knows she's 100% right. They keep pushing forward, just hoping there's another way out at the end of this tunnel. Lapis tells him that if they actually find a way out like this, Santa's luck is way more insane than she ever realized. Lauren warns her not to bank on his luck, and she admits her own luck is basically zero anyway. Lapis is about to say something else, but Lauren suddenly hears a noise and freezes right in his tracks. Lapis drops a massive truth bomb, revealing that her own parents actually took her eyes and limbs when she left the demon world, just to keep her powers under control. Lauren can't even wrap his head around it, just muttering parents, while looking totally crushed by how messed up this is. Lapis just keeps going, saying that's the whole reason she joined such a disaster of a party to start her life as an adventurer. Lauren finally slumps over and admits she wins, saying her life is way more of a disaster than his, but she's not done yet. She jokes about how Sarf and the others were so clueless it was actually easy to hide her identity, but Lauren tells her to just stop talking already. Lapis gets all choked up explaining that her parents hid her real body somewhere in the human lands, and she's stuck here until she finds it. Lauren tries to kill the awkward vibe, telling her he didn't mean to turn their bad luck into a competition. Lapis asks how she's even supposed to put herself back together, so Lauren tells her to just head home and ask her parents for help once she's finished. But Lapis suddenly yells his name to get him to look forward because Lauren asks if they've hit a dead end, but Lapis points out that a dead end wouldn't be glowing like the path right in front of them. Lauren catches a glow up ahead and worries more goblins are waiting to jump them, but Lapis tells him she doesn't sense anything nearby. Lauren tells her to cut the magic light and start sneaking through the pitch black. He picks her up and asks if she still can't stand, making Lapis apologize for being such a total pain. Lauren says it's cool, but he warns her he'll have to ditch her if things get too crazy, and Lapis totally gets it since she'd just be in the way of his sword anyway. Lauren's keeping a super close watch, just hoping they can wrap this up without him ever having to pull his sword. The two of them keep pushing deeper into the cave, heading straight for that tiny light up ahead. They hit a dead end at a wall, but Lapis spots light peeking through a tiny crack. She says she could totally squeeze through that tiny gap on all fours if she really had to. She points out that with her limbs in this state, she'd never be able to squeeze through a random hole like that on her own. Lauren just stands back and watches her struggle, totally convinced she's about to get her butt stuck. Lauren looks at the tiny crack and realizes he's got to smash the wall to make the opening big enough. Since things are about to get super noisy, he tells Lapis to watch their backs, and she just gives him a grin and says she's totally got this. Lauren grabs his massive sword, wondering if he can wrap this up before the guys chasing them catch up. He puts his whole body into the swing and smashes his blade right against the stone. As the rocks start crumbling, he realizes the wall is soft enough for his plan to actually work. He keeps hacking away at the cave wall while Lapis just hangs back and watches him do all the work. Lauren keeps pushing his limits until he finally smashes right through the thickest part of the stone. He's leaning on his sword just to catch his breath, and I tell Lapis the hole is finally big enough for them to squeeze through. Lapis gives him props but says he took way too long, while Lauren points out they're still safe since nobody has caught up yet. He picks her back up and asks if he should crawl through first to pull her from the other side, while Lapis just keeps apologizing for being a total burden. Lauren looks at the hole he just made and realizes there's no turning back now. Breaking through took every last bit of his energy, leaving him totally crashed out on the floor. He snaps out of it and asks what's going down on the other side. Lapis starts squeezing her way through that super tight crack in the rocks. Lauren reaches out and tells her to grab his hand. He yanks her through to the other side where she finally stops to catch her breath. Lapis bows and thanks him for the save, but Lauren just brushes it off like it's no big deal. He skips the small talk because he really needs her to check this out. He points at the massive stone building right in front of them and asks for her take on it. They're both just standing there, totally clueless about what kind of crazy place they've stumbled into. Lapis is totally losing it staring at that building, unable to believe she's actually looking at real-life magic construction materials. Lauren is totally lost, so he just asks her what that's even supposed to be. Lapis explains that this is ancient kingdom tech that sucks magic straight out of the air to power its own light. She starts totally nerding out over the discovery, while Lauren just stands there thinking this whole ancient kingdom thing sounds completely insane. This massive kingdom from way back in the day used god-tier magic to boss everyone around. They had everyone from humans to beastmen, and at their peak, they even had whole cities floating way up in the clouds. Then the whole place just vanished in one night, leaving every race to scramble and build the world we see today. Lauren thinks they just hit the jackpot, but Lapis warns him that the guild and researchers will just snatch it all away. He's totally annoyed she's killing the vibe, but she's already asking to scrape a piece of the wall off for her research. Lauren points out the floor is already covered in broken scraps, so Lapis snatches a perfect piece and gets ready to head out. Lauren keeps pushing through the darkness while Lapis hangs on to him for dear life. He warns her that if this place is actually an ancient ruin, they're totally cooked because of traps or monsters, but Lapis just grips her glowing rock while... He says it really just depends, because every spot in that ancient kingdom was built for a totally different reason. Lauren asks what she's getting at and checks if she can finally walk, but she just smiles and says it's still no use. She gets right in his face and tells him that for every scary fortress out there, there's a totally pointless building that doesn't even matter. It's the most pathetic ruin she's ever heard of. Literally just an ancient public toilet. And Lauren is totally losing her mind over it. Draft. She explains that these bathrooms have high-tech AC and plumbing but zero traps, since it'd be totally insane to have a guard in there watching everyone. Lauren points out that having a guy to protect you while you're busy is actually a genius move, and Lapis admits she never even thought of it that way. She keeps going, saying that finding a super dangerous ruin is actually way harder than finding a totally lame one. Lauren knows they gotta figure out what this place was actually used for first, and Lapis is totally on board with that plan. Lauren's really hoping this place isn't actually a death trap, but he tells Lapis to stay sharp, so she promises to scout for magic and traps while leaving all the heavy lifting to him. He reaches for his sword, praying that big blade is actually enough to handle whatever's lurking in the shadows. He knows if things go sideways, there's zero chance they can fight through that massive goblin army they passed earlier, so he's praying they can just sneak out unseen, but Lapis admits she's never been lucky enough for things to go that smooth, and Lauren totally agrees, saying he's never had a break and doesn't even believe in gods to pray for a miracle. Lauren suddenly reaches for his sword with insane speed, totally catching Lapis by surprise, and she stops dead in her tracks, totally freaked out by how fast his energy just shifted. She starts asking him what's wrong, but Lauren shuts her down instantly and tells her to be quiet. He stares deep into the shadows, sensing something move and whispering that something is definitely headed their way. He stands his ground with Lapis still hanging onto his back, ready to rip out his giant sword the second he spots a target. Lapis tells him she can use her magic to slow those guys down, so he just needs to give her the signal when he's ready to bolt. Suddenly, a voice yells from the shadows, sounding totally shocked to see this scary-looking dude carrying a girl on his back. The strangers freak out and scream, wondering how anyone else could be way out in these untouched ruins, or if their eyes are just playing tricks on them. One guy jokes that if this was all in his head, he'd definitely be looking at something way better than this. An older guy checks them out and sees they're warm, so they're definitely human. But man, they really picked a sketchy place to get lost. Suddenly, he spots a silver tag on Lauren's gear and realizes they've just run into a high-ranking silver adventurer. This young guy, Chuck, starts cracking up, asking if they only ended up in these ruins because they were running for their lives from some goblins. He can't stop laughing while telling Lauren that his luck is straight-up garbage for ending up in a dump like this. Lauren just stares back and says his whole team got wrecked, but since he's the only one who made it out, he thinks his luck is actually insane. Chuck is still acting way too cool with his hands behind his head, but Nim the elf girl is done with his nonsense and yanks him by the ear to put him in his place. Chuck's screaming for her to stop before his ear rips right off, but she just tells him that if he's not gonna listen, he doesn't even need ears. First up is Chuck, a silver rank thief who's looking totally ticked off right now, but right next to him is Nim, a silver rank archer who stays way more chill than her teammate. Then we've got Ritz, a silver rank swordsman who looks like he's totally done with life, while then you've got Kurtz, their silver ranked mage, who's super chill and actually looks pretty nice for a pro. Kurtz catches Lauren staring and asks if he's seriously never seen a real elf before. He just laughs it off, saying it's a totally fair reaction since Nim is such a babe, but she immediately threatens to poke his eyes out if he doesn't shut up. The old man jokes about being 1 foot in the grave, but admits going blind would totally suck, so he finally backs off while Chuck complains about them acting like this in front of the rookies. Ritz snaps everyone back to focus, saying he gets the deal, but they're on a mission and can't just walk Lauren and Lapis back to the exit. Nim jumps in to ask if they've heard any rumors about those ruins being explored near Iron Village lately. Lauren takes a second to let it all sink in, then looks at the crew and asks if they're seriously in this much trouble. Chuck jumps in looking totally annoyed, asking if they're seriously standing inside those new ruins right now. He explains that hitting untouched ruins is a total gamble, but the treasure is massive, so they signed up for the easy money right before a rival team crashed the party. Kurtz looks totally wiped out as he explains they're in a huge race to see who can do the best investigation, and since the winner gets all the cash, they've been rushing like crazy. Lauren listens to their story and tells them he totally gets it, and since he's not trying to mess with their mission, he just asks for the way out and tells the veterans that he and Lapis are going to handle the rest on their own. Ritz gets this look like he's about to drop some major bad news, and as he starts talking about the exit, Lauren is totally lost until Ritz finally snaps and spills the truth, looking totally stressed as he admits his group is just as lost as everyone else. Lauren's just frozen in shock, and he straight up tells the guy that his situation is a total disaster. Ritz gets super defensive right away, telling Lauren not to get it twisted because they definitely weren't being lazy with the map or forgetting how they got there. Lapis looks down, feeling guilty because she's worried her face totally gave away how she felt about the bad news. Ritz can tell the vibe is getting super weird, and as he and Lauren lock eyes, the whole room is feeling the massive tension until Lauren finally speaks up and asks Lapis if he's just being a jerk, or if his face means they're totally doomed. Ritz is a total nervous wreck, admitting that after the disaster they caused, he can't even bring himself to look his teammates in the eye. Lauren brushes off the awkward vibe and asks Ritz for the real story on how a bunch of pros actually got lost. Ritz facepalms and lets out a huge sigh, explaining that they didn't just get lost. They actually fell straight into a hidden pit trap. He looks super annoyed thinking back to the fall and puts all the blame on Chuck for totally missing that trap. Ritz says they got super lucky there weren't any spikes or poison at the bottom, but they fell a whole floor, and now they're totally trapped because it's way too high to climb back up. Now the whole squad is totally trapped underground, and he points out that if even one person had stayed up top, they'd be safe. But they all jumped in at once while Chuck just sits there groaning. Nim's fuming and tells Chuck she's never forgetting how he crashed right into her, but Chuck just claps back that landing on her felt exactly like hitting the hard floor anyway. Nim looks straight up terrifying as she glares at Chuck, telling him to say his final words right now because his time is officially up. She whips out her sword and tells Chuck he's straight up getting the death penalty for his massive screw-up. Chuck completely loses it and screams that he's telling the truth, looking totally terrified while Nim pulls out her sword, but Ritz totally ignores the drama behind him and keeps talking to Lauren, telling him that this is just how things went down. He says he wants to show them the exit, but it wouldn't even matter right now, and he admits they're in a total mess. Ritz is looking super stressed because his squad got wrecked in the fall, and even after using every last potion, they're still in bad shape, so he looks Lauren straight in the eye and tells her he's actually got a favor to ask them. Lapis peeks over Lauren's shoulder and tells Ritz she's still got enough juice for one last healing spell if he needs it. Ritz is totally frozen in shock, and he's so confused he can't even find his words, just making a weird noise while staring right at them. Lapis keeps bragging that her magic is way better than any potion, and if they give her a second, she can probably pull off another one. Lapis leans in and whispers that Ritz probably just wants Lauren to come along to pay for all those expensive potions. Lauren's totally suspicious now, so he whispers back and asks if the other group is just going to take him out so they can keep her for themselves. Lapis points out she can't walk, so someone has to carry her, but if one of Ritz's guys does it, they'll be way too weak to actually fight. But if Lauren handles it, the squad stays at full power since he can totally hold his own. She even says it's no big deal if they get dumped later, but Ritz gets totally triggered because he can hear everything, asking if they seriously think he's that much of a scumbag. Lapis jumps right in and asks if he's actually a bad guy, and while Ritz admits he looks like a total villain, he swears he's not about to do anything evil. Nim stands over the beat-up guy and tells everyone to chill, but she makes it clear that if they try to ditch Lauren and only take the girl, she'll end them right on the spot. Ritz gets serious and says he'll only help if Lapis uses her magic every single time he tells her to, so he's letting them tag along with his squad until they finally find a way out of these ruins. Lapis jumps on the deal instantly, telling him she's totally down for the plan. Ritz flashes a confident grin, saying the deal is locked in and he's hyped to work together until they finally make it out of these ruins. Lauren's got Lapis on his back as the whole squad finally hits the road. Lauren just gives a quick nod, showing he's totally cool with how things are going down. Ritz shouts to the whole crew that it's time to get back to business and keep pushing through the ruins. Lauren lets out a massive sigh, just praying the rest of the trip stays chill without any more crazy drama. Watching the other guys walk away, he's got a really bad feeling about their chances since they have such a massive journey ahead of them. They're walking through the quiet hallway when Lapis suddenly calls out his name to get his attention. She leans over his shoulder and asks how that burn on his arm is doing after the crazy fight they just finished. Lauren tells her not to sweat it, acting like the whole thing is honestly no big deal. He says Ritz's crew hooked him up with meds and bandages, but Lapis still tells him to speak up if the pain gets to be too much. Lapis whispers that she's actually got 2 divine arts left, and she's saving one of them just for Lauren. Lauren realized she totally played the other group by lying about being on her last shot just to keep a secret weapon. But lying during a business deal feels super sketchy to him, but he's still moving forward anyway. He knows he's totally out of options, so until they find an exit, he's stuck with this silver rank squad, which means they're stuck with each other until this whole mission is finished. While they're walking, Ritz speaks up and says this whole place is giving off some seriously bad vibes. He points out that in a spot this old, you'd normally be tripping over golems and zombies every 2 seconds, but so far, the only things they're finding are enemies that have already been wrecked. He thinks it's super sketchy that none of the regular dungeon guards are popping up to stop them. Lauren just asks if they should be hyped that things are finally going easy for once. Ritz sets Lauren straight and tells her that guardians definitely show up in spots like this, looking pretty stressed because Lauren points out that even though they're in the right spot, for some weird reason, the only things they've run into are goblins. Lapis jumps in and asks if the goblins came from outside, wondering if there are more cracks in the walls just like the one they fell through. Ritz says that's impossible because the whole ruin was locked tight until just a few days ago. He says the guy who found the spot needed a whole squad of mages just to crack the seal, so the original guardian is definitely still stuck inside. But as they head deeper, he points out that there isn't a single sign of any other monsters besides the goblins they already found. Oikert thinks the guardians either died of old age or got wrecked by the goblins, but he's confused because there aren't any bodies or bones left behind. The old mage says things would be way different if the place was only guarded by ghosts or spirits that don't leave a body behind. If that's true, this isn't just some random ruin, and he starts wondering why anyone would even build a place like this. Lauren just stares blankly as she realizes this job is becoming way more intense than a simple trip to some ruins. Ritz tells everyone to stop stressing over the history of these ruins for now. The biggest problem they've got right now is just finding a way to reach those upper floors. Lauren stops dead in his tracks and reaches for his sword. He warns the squad that he can hear another pack of goblins waiting right up ahead. He tells Lapis to jump off his back so he can finally start fighting, but she just taps his shoulder and tells him it's all good, since she's totally not ready to hop down yet. Ritz tells Lauren to just watch their backs while the others handle the front, and she's totally on board. Ritz spots just 7 enemies and thinks this whole fight is going to be way too easy. Kurz asks if they need some magic backup, but Chuck's like, "Nah, we've got this, it'll be over in a second." Right then, the goblins come charging out of the shadows, screaming and ready to throw down. Ritz jumps in and blocks the hit with his shield, stopping that goblin dead in its tracks. Chuck moves like a total blur, slicing through 2 of them before they even realize what's happening. The rest of the pack gets wiped out instantly, and Nim keeps her bow ready after sniping the last runner, leaving. Chuck wipes the sweat off his forehead and catches his breath, looking totally satisfied with how easy that whole thing was. Lauren hangs back with Lapis and tells the squad their coordination was seriously next level. Chuck just smirks at the praise and says it wasn't even worth talking about. Kurtz jumps in to remind Lauren that they're silver rank adventurers for a reason. Lauren just gives a little smile and says he's sorry for being a jerk again. Deep down, he's realizing just how insane the skill gap is between the different ranks. Ritz starts slicing into one of the dead goblins and calls Lauren over to check out what he found. Ritz shows off the goblin ears and tells Lauren's crew that since they were out hunting, it still counts even if they didn't finish off the nest. They can still use these as proof to get paid for every goblin they managed to take out. Lauren asks if he's actually sure about this, thinking their pro squad shouldn't even waste energy lugging around such cheap loot. Nim points out how rare it is for a greedy guy like Ritz to actually hand over cash, while Chuck jokes about flexing on all the other guys. Ritz totally snaps and tells them to shut up, acting like he's finally just looking out for his juniors for a change. Chuck keeps the jokes coming, laughing that it's probably gonna rain spears tomorrow since Ritz is actually being super nice. Lapis thinks they should just grab them while the offer is still on the table, and Lauren realizes she's totally right. Lauren grabs the bag and it's packed to the brim, way heavier than he thought it'd be. Looking at all that insane loot, he starts feeling super awkward about taking so much stuff from them. It's even worse when he sees the blood soaking right through the cloth, and that nasty smell starts kicking in. Ritz looks down at the dead monster and complains that these goblins just never stop coming while they wrap things up. He holds out the bag of trophies and tells Lauren to grab it. Ritz says thanks and calls it a day, but Lauren is standing there sweating, wondering how everyone else can just ignore that nasty smell. Suddenly, he hears this super heavy breathing right behind his head. He turns around and finds Lapis slumped all over him, gasping for air like she's totally wiped out. She's quick to tell him she's not hyped at all. It's just that the smell is so gross, she literally can't breathe through her nose anymore. Lauren just looks away and tells her he totally gets it, saying she doesn't need to explain a thing. But then, Nim stops everyone dead in their tracks, and Saw tells the group to hold up because the whole vibe of the place just shifted. She catches a whiff of something new and realizes the smell has totally changed, and it's definitely not a goblin this time. The elf's face goes totally serious as she realizes that the scent she's picking up is actually fresh blood. Chuck scans the area but tells Nim he doesn't see anything like what she was talking about. He figures that whatever she's smelling is definitely waiting for them just a little further down the trail. Lapis peeks over Lauren's shoulder, sounding totally confused as she asks if there's even a difference, since she always thought all blood just smelled like straight-up rust, but Ritz shuts everyone up by telling them that Nim's senses are way sharper than anyone else in the room. Nim smacks Chuck for his trash talk, and he yelps that her body is just as sharp as her nose. This just makes Ritz snap and tell him to quit acting like such a total loser. Chuck just laughs it off, telling everyone they're being way too stiff and need to chill out before they mess everything up. But moving on. The squad decides to push forward, staying totally on guard as they head even deeper inside. Ritz looks back at the two of them and asks if the priestess is still having a hard time moving. She leaves Lapis to apologize for her, saying she just needs a little more time to get her head straight. Lauren just stands there for a second, looking like she's totally lost in her own head while she processes everything. Chuck looks at Lapis and tells her he doesn't know her deal, but she should probably head back to the church since she looks totally wiped out. Lauren jumps in and tells him it's her choice to make, and he's got no right to decide for her. Chuck stops dead in his tracks and tells everyone to look at what's right in front of them. They look ahead and the whole path is a straight-up disaster zone. Nim drops down and finds some leather armor, but man, it's totally drenched in blood. Ritz looks at the mess and notices the blood is still bright red, which means whatever went down here just happened. Kurtz rubs his beard, thinking another team must have ended up on this floor with them, and then Kurtz. He starts wondering which guy from that other squad was actually the one inside the armor they found. Nim just sighs and says Ritz and Chuck are being way too reckless with the whole situation. Nim is totally over it and says Kurtz has finally lost his mind, but the old man yells back that he's still as sharp as ever. Nim ignores all the bickering and asks Lauren to tell her what he really thinks. Lauren asks if she's sure she wants his opinion over her own teams, but Nim tells her to let those guys chill for a bit while she finds out what he thinks happened to the person inside that bloody armor. Lauren looks down at the bloody mess and says there's so much blood that the owner is definitely a goner. He keeps going, saying it's pretty obvious they just got taken out right there on the floor. Nim stops to think and realizes that if the armor belongs to the other team, then their thief was the one wearing it, which means he's the one who vanished. Lapis suddenly blurts out the word woman, and it totally catches Lauren off guard. She mentions that these ruins are only supposed to have goblins, but she's totally stuck on the fact that a woman was involved. Nim stares Lauren down and asks him straight up what he thinks about that. Lapis can't help but speak up and say that this whole situation feels totally wrong. Lapis drops a massive truth bomb, saying the owner of that bloody armor was definitely a girl, which makes things way more intense. The whole room goes dead silent when she drops the bomb that a goblin was the one who killed her, and Lauren just stands there staring in total shock. She explains that if their theories are actually right, then this whole situation is totally messed up. It makes zero sense, especially since a normal goblin would never act like this. Nim jumps in with a super serious look, admitting she was also starting to get a really bad vibe about that. Lapis thinks there's something else lurking way deep inside these ruins. Lauren isn't buying it at all and demands to know exactly what she means by that. Lapis points out that the mission info said these ruins were only supposed to be full of goblins. And the crazy part is, these goblins are famous for not killing the girls they catch right away. It's because those monsters have some seriously gross ways of using them instead of just finishing them off. Lapis points out the brutal truth. Even though a girl was wearing this armor, they still killed her right then and there. Lapis thinks this is way too weird if they're really just up against goblins. Neuron stays quiet while Lapis explains that these monsters live for the thrill, dragging their victims back to the nest while they're still alive. Lauren sighs, realizing that if she's right about how these things act, things are about to get crazy. It's basically a fact that something way scarier than a goblin is lurking in these ruins. Nim looks over at Lauren and asks if he remembers the way back to that crack in the wall where they first met. Lauren tells her it was basically just a straight shot the whole way through. Nim takes a second to let that sink in before finally nodding that she totally gets it now. He turns to Ritz and tells him something feels totally wrong, insisting they bail right now to figure out their next move. Ritz starts looking super stressed out and tells everyone they need to just hold up for a second. Ritz admits things are super sketchy, but he says they can't just assume those bones belong to the missing group, and they definitely can't bail without a better excuse than just a bad vibe. Let's be real. Running back to town just because of some bloody armor would make them look like total noobs. Chuck flashes a metal dog tag, explaining that they need to find one of these to prove the people they're looking for are actually dead. Ritz agrees to stay sharp, but says there's no way they're backing down now, because bailing without proof would totally trash their reputation and make it impossible to get hired later. He makes it clear that if they actually find those ID tags Chuck mentioned, they'll finally have a serious talk about getting out of there. Nim listens to his logic and just says she's totally down for the plan. Ritz stares ahead and warns the crew that since they're heading deeper into the ruins, they better be ready for a massive fight. Just as the group starts heading out, Lapis taps Lauren on the arm and whispers his name. Lauren looks down and asks if she's finally feeling better after that crazy shock from earlier. Lapis gives him a quick nod, letting him know she's totally fine and thanking him for always having her back. Ritz goes to check on Lapis to see if she's finally stopped shaking and is ready to get back on her feet. She tells him she's totally fine, admitting that while Lawrence's back was actually super comfy, she didn't want to keep being a total burden. Chuck notices right away, smirks, and asks if the two of them are actually dating. Lauren tries to shut that down real quick, but Lapis just smirks and tells Chuck it's still a work in progress. Chuck starts laughing his head off and tells Lauren he's impressed she's such a top-tier girl, but then Nim suddenly decks him out of nowhere. He towers over him with a terrifying look, asking if he's trying to lure every single monster in the ruins right to them. She tells him to shut it, or she'll end him herself before a monster even gets the chance. Ritz ignores all the drama and tells Lauren that since his hands are free, he's finally ready to jump into the fight. He's in charge of guarding the rear, and Lapis jumps in to say she's already been picked to back him up. Lauren keeps her guard up while Lapis scans the area, finally acting like her old self again. Lapis is totally buzzing with energy, telling Lauren that a crazy situation like this is actually super rare for him. She points out they're tagging along on a high-level hunt for ancient ruins, which is way too big of a job for a low-level copper rank. Lauren looks super stressed, yelling her name and asking if she even knows how dangerous this spot actually is. Lapis doesn't even care. She just leans in with a fake pout and tells him he's being way too scary. But that totally flops because Lauren calls her out for being way too obvious with her acting. She ends up sticking to his arm anyway, and even though he tells her to get off, she just lets out a disappointed whine, so Lauren just watches the rest of the group walk ahead while I'm over here sweating, just praying that nobody else caught them acting like that. He tells her that even if she's super hyped about the ruins, she seriously needs to chill out and dial it back. Lapis just lets out a huge sigh and admits she's basically got no other choice. She scans the area as they walk, finally asking the group what the big plan is and where they're even headed. Ritz explains they're just exploring the ruins and checking on the other team, but he honestly can't tell which one is more important right now. Lapis isn't by herself while she's trying to wrap her head around all this new info. She's like, since the whole squad already fell once, Maybe they should just head right back to that pitfall trap. Ritz isn't buying it at all, so he stares her down and demands one good reason why they'd even try that. Lapis points out that the pitfall was a total trap meant to snag anyone trying to sneak in. It's not meant to kill them right away, so she figures this whole floor was built just to trap anyone who falls in. Ritz finally puts it all together and realizes the builders left these monsters down here on purpose to take out anyone unlucky enough to fall in. He still can't figure out why anyone would build a system that's such a massive pain to deal with. Lapis stays totally chill, telling him that even if she doesn't know the exact history of this place, most civilizations throughout time basically think the same way. He's basically saying that since nobody cares about intruders, the whole place was built to be a total nightmare for them. Lapis gets a super serious look on her face, and it's clear this place is actually being used for something way different. The squad is looking super exhausted, but she tells them to stop stressing because there's literally nothing worth finding here. She tells them that if they actually want to find those ruins, wandering around down here is just a massive waste of time. Ritz asks why they're heading back to where they fell, so Lapis explains there's gotta be a secret tunnel for repairs or for clearing out the bodies. Lauren just stands back and watches, totally sure she's about to find a way out, which makes Ritz finally agrees it's their only choice, even though Chuck starts whining that they didn't see a single door when they first landed. Lapis keeps it real and says the builders wouldn't just leave an exit out in the open for anyone to find, so it's definitely hidden away. Chuck keeps swearing he would have spotted it if something was actually there. The others just stare him down like they aren't buying it, and he's so stuck he can't even think of a comeback. Ritz finally makes the call, telling the crew they're heading back to the fall site to start the real search. Kurtz whips out the map he's been drawing and checks his notes to see what he's got written down. He points right at a dead-end wall, making it super clear that way is a total no-go. The squad keeps pushing through the tight stone hallway, and Kurt tells them to check the next spot just as they finally make it to the spot, and Lauren tells the group they're back exactly where they first fell. Everyone stops dead to stare at the massive room, noticing the ceiling is way higher than anywhere else in the dungeon, and someone asks if that lid is actually the trap door they fell through, and honestly, it looks like they're right. Lauren looks all over the walls but finds nothing, asking Lapis if she's totally sure there's even a way up. Chuck starts yelling and asks if he's right, looking totally annoyed that anyone would even doubt his skills. He starts ranting about how a silver-rank thief like him would have totally spotted that door, while Lapis just shoots him a look and says if there was a secret path, he totally would have found it already. Lapis walks over to a totally normal-looking spot on the wall and presses her hand against it. Lauren's random moves are so weird that she even questions herself while he just stands there totally confused. She says the magic in the walls makes it super hard to see, but she still managed to find a secret switch. Out of nowhere, a giant hatch in the ceiling creaks open, and the whole squad is left staring up in total shock. Chuck gets super annoyed and asks why the old man didn't see that coming, but Kurtz just calls him a moron and says a thief like him should have been the one to find the trap. Lauren just watches them argue and straight up admits he has no clue what's going on. Nim looks up at the opening and spots a simple ladder just waiting for them. Someone points out that the whole thing was honestly way too easy. Lapis decides it's finally time for the whole squad to head up to the next floor. Chuck eyes the exit and asks the crew if the coast is clear before they start their climb. Chuck eyes the ladder, decides it's solid enough to hold them, and makes the call to go up first. Nim's totally down with the plan because if things go south at the top, Chuck is the only one who can actually survive that massive jump back down. She tells him to stop stalling and just get it over with, giving him a quick cheer as he starts his super shaky climb up the wall. Lauren saw the whole thing go down and just had to ask if that sounded a little weird. He looks totally wiped out and admits this whole mess is just a massive waste of time. Lapis just grins and reminds him that if the other group found that secret path first, they wouldn't even be together right now. Chuck finally reaches the top of the ladder, grumbling that they only won because they got lucky. He leans over the ledge and yells that it's all clear, telling the rest of the crew to start heading up one at a time. When everyone asks who's up next, Lapis cheerfully suggests that she and Lauren should just hang back and go last. She starts humming because she's so hyped to explore, but Lauren points out she's acting way too happy for a place this sketchy. Lauren warns that even if they finish this climb, the other group is probably just going to tell them to get lost and go home. Ritz and his squad already know the way back once they reach the floor where everyone took that huge fall. Lapis completely freezes because she never saw this coming, while Lauren just thinks she's being a bit slow. She explained that she got way too hyped about the ruins and totally forgot that getting back out was the main priority. Since the floor is basically empty, Lauren stares off, thinking about how this place is way too dangerous. He's honestly just trying to dip out of there as fast as he can, so let's keep it moving. Lauren asks Lapis if they have any other ways to help the squad, but Lapis admits that besides her divine arts, she's got nothing. She knows that suddenly using magic would look way too sus, so she offers to use her knowledge of the area to help them out instead. She tells him that if she can just figure out what these ruins are, she'll finally be able to crack the map for them. Lauren thinks it's actually pretty awesome, even if he's low-key nervous about her showing up again. Lapis asks Lauren if he's ever noticed that every single adventurer guild branch is built with the exact same layout. She explains they do this so the staff can jump right into work, even if they get sent to a brand new city. She smirks, pointing out that the same exact logic works for these ancient ruins they're exploring. She says the ancient kingdom was actually super practical, so they used the same design for every building that had the same job to make things easy. Lauren asks if that rule ever gets broken, and Lapis says yeah, mostly because every era has its own share of total weirdos who... The builders here were seriously out of their minds with these designs, while the squad keeps pushing straight up the ruins. Ritz finally hits the top and gasps that they made it, but his relief gets cut short real fast because he freezes the second he peeks over the edge, totally speechless at the sight of what's waiting for him. He starts screaming at everyone to get back down the ladder right now because things just got way too dangerous. And just like that, a huge swarm of goblins bursts out of the shadows, screaming that it's an ambush. The hallway is totally packed with goblins as a massive wave of them floods the ruins. As the group gets hunted down, Ritz screams in total shock because he can't believe how huge that swarm is. He's sprinting for his life, shouting about how this many monsters were even hiding in these ruins the whole time. Naren yells back that she has no clue where they came from since they just spawned in, and there's no way she's letting some goblins take her out. Ritz tells everyone to shut up and just focus on running as fast as they can, so... Lauren keeps his head down, wondering how he got stuck in this same mess all over again, especially with these crazy high numbers. He knows that if they make one wrong move or get trapped in a corner, they're gonna be totally surrounded in seconds. The second that goes down, they're basically dead meat as they sprint through the shadows. Lapis is starting to sound super worried, admitting that things are looking seriously bad for them because Kurtz and Naren are finally hitting their breaking point, gasping for air as their bodies start to give out on them. Ritz screams at Kurtz and Lapis to keep their legs moving, telling them they've got to find a way to hang on, while he screams that if anyone stops running now, they're gonna die right on the spot. Lauren looks over and sees the whole squad is totally wiped out and hitting their absolute limit. He notices Lapis is really struggling because her mana is still totally drained, and there's no way she can keep this up. Lapis realizes she's just slowing everyone down and tells Lauren to ditch her since there's no other choice. But she lets out a shocked yelp when Lauren suddenly lunges in and grabs her anyway. Ritz asks if he's really okay carrying her, but Lauren just shrugs it off and says he's totally used to this. He remembers his mercenary days, when dragging his buddies out of a total disaster was just another day on the job. He's running on zero sleep and even he has to admit that things are getting way too intense. Kurtz feels like a total drag and tells Lauren he's sorry, swearing he'll definitely make it up to him later. Lapis looks up from Lauren's shoulder and says she's super sorry for being such a total drag. She feels bad for being a burden again, but Lauren tells her it's no big deal since they aren't even using their legs. They better start using their brains because he knows if they keep this up, they're just going to get exhausted and end up getting caught. Lapis whips her head around and yells for Kurtz to show her what he's really got. She asks him to blast some fireballs to clear the way, but Kurtz tells her that against a crowd this huge, it's just not going to be enough. That's not going to do much, and even if he throws up an earth wall to block the path, it won't hold them back for long. It doesn't take long before Lapis asks about using a firestorm, and Kurtz says he might actually be able to pull it off. He could maybe fire twice if he went all out, but Lapis realizes super fast that 2 shots just won't be enough. She actually pulls off the rescue and gives Kurtz props for his skills, but Lauren snaps and tells them to quit yapping. He's trying to block out the noise and lock in, frantically searching for a better plan before their time is totally up. Ritz starts losing his mind, yelling that they're all gonna be monster snacks, while Lapis adds that she and Nim will probably be kept alive by the goblins for breeding. Kurtz thinks that's a huge possibility since the girls from the other groups didn't get eaten like the guys did, which makes the whole situation. The mood gets even more tense when Chuck asks what they're supposed to do, and Lauren totally snaps, yelling at everyone to finally start taking things seriously. Nim is sweating bullets and totally stressed out, realizing that things are looking really bad for them right now. She looks over at the squad and says she's hitting her breaking point, but she doesn't even get to finish that thought. Ritz steps up and tells her that if she can't run anymore, he'll just carry her on his back. They can keep moving while he stays back to buy them every second he can, even if it slows him down. Neem hangs her head, feeling totally guilty, and apologizes for being such a drag, but Ritz notices she's being way quieter than usual. Lauren is totally exhausted, staring at the floor and thinking there's just no way an emergency exit exists on a floor like this. They've got 0 moves left and their bodies are totally trashed, so it's hard to tell if they're just getting sloppy or if their brains are literally shutting down from being so exhausted. Lauren looks down that creepy hallway and realizes that if they keep running, they're dead meat. So he knows he's got to try something crazy, even if it's a total gamble. He tells the squad that doing literally anything is better than just sitting around waiting for the end, and while he's got an idea, he's not even sure it counts as a real plan. Lauren looks over at the squad and asks Ritz if he even remembers the way they took to get into this mess. Ritz looks back and admits he's totally lost, but he's betting Chuck has the whole way memorized. Lauren points up at the ceiling and asks if they can find their way back to that hole where the goblins were falling through earlier. Chuck is totally losing it and says they can't just turn back, and even though there are some other paths that cross over, he thinks it's pointless and asks what they're even gonna do once they get there. Lauren points out that since a massive swarm of goblins already flooded out of that hole, the floor above is probably all out of monsters for now. He explains that while the goblins can just dive down in a huge swarm, they'll need ladders to climb back up, which totally breaks up their group. This keeps them from getting swarmed, but Chuck isn't convinced and warns Lauren that these goblins are way smarter than they look. Chuck's calling it now. Those monsters aren't just gonna stand there while they climb out, and if they get jumped on that ladder, it's game over for everyone. Lauren looks over at Kurtz and asks if they can use magic to buy them a little more time. Kurtz thinks fast and decides to roast the front line with a firestorm while trapping the rest behind a massive earth wall. The old mage says he's got it covered, but Ritz is still freaking out because those goblins are charging way too hard for a basic wall to stop them. Lauren shouts that they just need to hit the top floor before the wall caves in, and if they fail, it's all on him. He finishes up by telling the squad he's staying behind to watch their backs all by himself. Ritz looks at him like he's totally lost it and asks if he's actually serious, because there's no way one person can take on that many monsters alone. Lauren's not trying to fight the whole swarm at once. He's just going to pick off anyone lucky enough to make it through the fire. He gives Ritz a confident look and tells him to just keep climbing for his life, so they never have to find out what happens if they fail. Ritz finally gives in and tells Chuck to lead them back to the hole, and Chuck's totally down for it. He takes off at a full sprint, yelling for the whole squad to follow his lead. Ritz tells Kurtz to get his magic ready, and the old mage says he's all over it. Ritz breaks down the plan, telling Chuck he's got to be the first one up there so he can pull the rest of the squad up. Ritz stops and looks Lauren right in the eye, reminding him that since he's the leader, he's the one who has to stay behind and watch their backs. Lauren isn't backing down at all, telling him she appreciates the gesture, but he's still the only one who can get this job done. Ritz is just like, "Bro, why are you making such a huge deal out of this?" Lauren warns Ritz that his armor is way too heavy to climb fast, and the goblins are totally gonna snatch his legs before he makes it, so he tells them that even though he's a total newbie adventurer, he's actually a pro mercenary who's spent his whole life watching people's backs on the battlefield. Ritz finally gives in and tells Lauren he's counting on him, even though he totally hates the idea of leaving him behind. Chuck suddenly screams that they finally hit the ladder, noticing that the monsters have stopped raining down from the hole. Ritz takes control right away, shouting for everyone to start climbing the second they reach the ladder. These monsters are moving way faster than anyone thought, and someone lets out a curse as the beasts finally catch up. Ritz wastes 0 time and screams at the old man to unleash his magic right this second. Kurtz starts his chant, summoning a massive vortex as a wild storm of red flames begins to rage right in front of him. He screams at the top of his lungs, unleashing a giant firestorm that tears the whole place apart. He's not even close to being done, and he just casually tells the guys he's already moving on to the next spell. Lauren and Ritz cover his back while Kurt summons a massive earth wall to block the path. He slams his staff down to summon a massive rock wall that blocks the path, and with the monsters trapped, the group scrambles up the ladder, yelling for everyone to hurry while they have the chance. Lauren watches the old man work and realizes silver rank mages are just built different, giving her hope they might actually make it out alive. Out of nowhere, a massive crash shakes the entire place and everyone just stops dead in their tracks. Ritz is totally losing it, screaming about how insane the pressure is and how those things are acting way too weird. Lauren stays locked in and points out that even if the magic was lightning fast, there should still be a ton of heat behind that wall. The impact is absolutely massive, and someone yells that they've never seen goblins with enough guts to chase people down this hard. Lauren snaps at them to quit the chatter and just scramble up that ladder as fast as they can. Out of nowhere, a fist blasts through the barrier and punches a goblin right in the face. Lauren isn't messing around, throwing a massive punch to stop those monsters from squeezing through the gap. Ritz screams up the ladder for everyone to hurry up, but the old man just yells back that he's going as fast as he can. Lauren looks at the total madness and realizes there's no running away, so he's just gonna have to stay and fight. Up top, Chuck is sweating bullets and scanning the area, just praying that no more enemies are waiting to jump them. He reaches down from the ledge and yells for Nim to grab his hand so she can get up there fast. Chuck finally grabs Nim and hauls her onto the ledge, letting out a massive sigh of relief. Nim is totally drained, doubling over and gasping for air after that crazy near miss. She tries to thank Chuck, but he totally brushes her off and asks if the priestess is their next target. Down below, one of the guys screams at them to stop yapping and get moving already. He looks into that dark tunnel and realizes this floor is a total disaster too. Lauren is still down there holding the line, screaming at the group to see if they're finally done yet. Lapis is struggling to haul herself up the ladder, yelling back that she's almost at the top. Nim's face goes totally pale as she points into the distance, screaming for Chuck to look at what's coming right for them. Chuck grits his teeth and totally snaps, complaining that even more of those things are still showing up, so Lapis gets told to go help Ritz while they ask the old man if he can still use magic, and he says he's only got one shot left. Lauren stands his ground at the dark tunnel entrance, shouting for Ritz and the crew to keep climbing while he keeps the monsters busy. He's really starting to feel the heat because these guys just keep coming, and he's struggling to even stay on his feet with all the blood everywhere. He stops for a quick second to catch his breath, but then he realizes something is totally off. It finally hits him that there should be way more bodies on the floor than what he's actually seeing. He knows for a fact he's taken out way more goblins than the few bodies he sees lying around him. He remembers them all crashing down from the ceiling in a massive pile, getting totally crushed by the fall or trampled by the weight of the crowd. So basically, a massive mountain of dead monsters should be piled up right in front of him. The craziest part is that when he first walked in, the floor was totally clean and there wasn't a single body anywhere. Lawrence is still trying to wrap his head around what's happening when he looks up just in time to see those dead monsters are actually moving and dragging themselves right back up. Lawrence spots a goblin lurking in the shadows and wonders what that thing is even up to. It hits him right then that they're actually gathering up all the dead goblin bodies. He's just standing there sweating buckets, trying to figure out why they'd even want a massive pile of dead bodies. He mumbles a swear and yells for Chuck to see what's going on, when all of a sudden, Lapis shouts his name from the top of the ladder to get him to look up. Lauren looks up and asks if the rest of the squad actually finished the climb. Lapis says they're all set, but she warns him that the top floor is already totally swarming with goblins. He warns him that there's a massive mob of them just waiting up there. She looks totally terrified and says some seriously creepy ones just showed up. He explains that even though the others are fighting back, the whole situation is falling apart way too fast. Lapis screams down to Lauren to get a move on because they're about to be totally surrounded. Lauren looks totally fed up when he realizes he's got even more goblins to deal with. He's wondering why this place is so obsessed with these monsters, but he knows he's got to hit that top floor right now. He grabs his gear and gets ready to bolt out of there. A massive blast rips through the madness, giving him the perfect chance to make his move. Lauren spots his opening and starts booking it straight for the ladder. He scrambles up the rungs at lightning speed, keeping a death grip on his massive sword. The second he reaches the top, Lapis is right there asking him what's going down below. She tells him Chuck's already out with an injury, and while Ritz is still holding the line, she stops mid-sentence and screams that Nim is in huge trouble. Lauren looks up to see a giant shadowy monster looming over him and asks what that creepy black thing is. Nim looks up in total shock as he realizes this monster isn't moving even an inch, no matter what he does. Lapis screams for it to stop just when it looks like everything is finally over, but Lauren speeds in and lands a monster kick right to the goblin's face. He looks back, realizing that hit would have totally ripped a normal goblin's head right off. He realizes this guy is built different and knows he has to finally go all out. He mumbles to himself that this has to be a joke because that monster is still standing. Nim tries to fight back from the ground, but he says the monster's skin is way too tough to break through. Out of nowhere, a hit lands and the goblin stumbles back, grabbing his face in total pain. Lapis shouts to Nim as the squad realizes that even though its skin is super tough, its eyes are a total weak spot. Lauren gets that look of pure focus, thinking if one hit won't do the trick, he's just going to keep smashing that thing until it finally stays down, charging in and swinging with everything he's got. He stays low and keeps his speed up, hunting for any tiny gap to make his move. Lapis screams his name, warning him that there's still another monster lurking nearby. Ritz gets caught in a nasty grip and yells at the jerk to get his hands off him. But the monster crushes him even harder until Ritz feels like his bones are literally about to snap. Lauren asks the old man where all his magic went, and Kurt screams back that he's totally out of juice. Kurt says he's totally tapped out and can't even use basic magic after going all in on that one guy, so he's basically out of the fight. Lauren's basically screaming at their trash luck because he knows everything is falling apart right now. The monsters let out a massive roar that shakes the whole room while I stand tall over the group as they struggle to survive. Ritz explains how that black monster just spawned out of nowhere, arrows were totally useless, and Chuck got yeeted trying to save Nim right when Lauren showed up to save the day. Nim stares at the ground and tells Chuck she's sorry, admitting this whole disaster is totally her fault. Chuck tells her to shut it and stop being so moody since it doesn't fit her vibe. He just wants her to hurry up and heal him so they can get back to the action. Lauren looks over at Lapis and asks if she's finally figured out what they're actually up against. Lapis stares into the dark ruins and says she's got a theory, but if she's actually right about this, they end up in some super sketchy ruins, and Lauren just repeats the words, wondering what could actually be so bad about this place. Itritz looks totally wiped out, but Lapis tells him she's got something she needs to double-check. Ritz asks if they should just follow her lead, and Lapis tells him straight up that they've got no other choice. She thinks it over and explains that while they're here to investigate, the real problem is that if they don't put this place back to sleep fast, things are gonna get way worse. Ritz yells that they gotta move fast, and Lapis warns everyone that if they just stand there, the next attack is gonna hit them any second. Ritz is totally freaking out because if that creepy black goblin shows up for round 2, they are basically toast. Lapis leans in and asks Chuck if he wants her to bust out some divine arts to help him, but Chuck tells her he's cool because the meds are finally kicking in, even if he's still a bit dizzy from that smack to the head. Lapis isn't buying it and warns him that head injuries are super dangerous, telling him to see a real doctor, but Chuck just flashes a smile and thanks her for the tip. He says he'll follow her lead if they actually survive, but Ritz is skeptical and asks if he can even stand up. Chuck just tells him to quit with the dumb questions because he's totally got this under control. He looks at Nim and says he's ready to move the second she gives the word, but she's still super worried and tells him not to push himself too hard. Chuck reaches out and tells her it's all good, saying he's not actually as beat up as he looks. He says he only blacked out for a second because that monster landed one lucky hit. He tells her to stop stressing because he's definitely going to be ready to move when the time comes. Kurds is looking totally wrecked and admits he's officially out of mana, so he's basically dead weight for the rest of the battle. Chuck just gives him a look and tells the old man to chill out, since nobody's actually blaming him for running out of juice. Ritz jumps in and says they'd be totally cooked if Kurtz hadn't taken out that monster, so they need to get moving right now. Lauren takes charge, weaving through the ruins so easily it's like he's got the whole map memorized. While they're walking, Lauren wonders what those monsters really were since their skin was crazy tough, so he asks Lapis if she thinks they were some kind of high-level goblin. Lapis thinks it might be a hobgoblin, but she figures it's probably just a normal goblin that grew way bigger than the rest. Lauren's not buying it at all, so he asks her what's really going on because just getting huge doesn't explain why it looked like that. Lapis looks at him and asks if he caught anything else super sketchy while they were throwing hands. Lauren points out that the goblins were actually gathering their dead, and he's totally sure it wasn't just because they were hungry. He points out there are way too many of them and the vibe is totally off, so Lapis agrees that these goblins definitely aren't normal. Lapis mentions that these ruins are probably just crawling with goblins, which totally catches Lauren off guard as he asks her what she even means by that. As they keep walking, Lapis looks over and asks if he's ever heard of stuff like alchemy, or how people actually make medicine. Lauren knows what those jobs are called and has seen people doing them, but he doesn't actually have any friends in that field. Lapis tells him it's cool, but then she immediately switches the subject to the animals those researchers are using for their experiments. Lauren finally realizes she's talking about lab mice and how they're used to test out new drugs. Lapis asks why they always use mice for these experiments, but Lauren just points a finger and asks if she seriously expects a mercenary to know random trivia like that. Lapis gives a little smirk and says it's just some random facts, but then she starts explaining it anyway. She explains that mice are the top choice for experiments because they breed super fast. Plus, they grow up way faster than normal animals and can pop out a ton of babies in no time. Lauren starts connecting the dots about how fast they grow and multiply, and it looks like everything is finally starting to make sense. Lauren stares ahead, trying to connect the dots, while Lapis asks if he knows any other monster with those exact same traits. It finally clicks for him, and he looks totally freaked out as he asks if she's really talking about goblins. Lapis flashes a huge grin and tells him he's spot on, super hyped that he's actually keeping up with her. She's not stopping there, and says if her theory about these monsters is actually true, then... So this whole place is basically a massive secret lab built just to run experiments on goblins. She explains that they're super easy to keep alive and basically the cheapest way to get the job done. She explains that since they look human but nobody actually cares about them, scientists can experiment on them without feeling bad at all. Olapus asks if there's anyone better to test on, but then he instantly admits there's totally no one else. She looks back at him and says she's positive this whole place was built just to run some weird experiments on goblins. Lauren just trails behind her looking totally clueless, repeating research and cheap, like he's never even heard those words before. Lapis keeps the conversation going as they walk, saying goblins are super easy to take care of since they'll eat literally anything, even leftovers or old corpses. She points out that according to the old records, those ancient cities used to just dump all their random trash right on top of them. She looks totally hyped while explaining that the trash dropped by a massive 80% because those goblins are doing an insane job clearing it all out. Lauren looks totally grossed out and asks if she seriously thinks calling that economical is the right way to put it. Lapis gets serious and explains that to the ancient kingdom, goblins weren't even considered alive. They were basically just dust. Since they multiply like crazy, Yushi figures the scientists were breeding them on purpose to make all these freaky new versions. This makes Lauren stop and wonder if those other types she's talking about are anything like the crazy monster they just fought. Lapis turns back with a grin, telling him that because of what this place was used for, it's actually super common to find. There are even gross goblin nests hidden in corners just like this. She starts to say there are a few more around, but she suddenly freezes when, suddenly, a bunch of goblins crawl out of the shadows and surround them, getting ready to strike. Lapis keeps pushing through the dark, warning that things are about to get way creepier since this place wasn't just built for breeding and Lauren. Lauren can't believe how chill she's acting and asks if she's seriously gonna be this casual in a literal breeding ground, but she just says that's how she rolls and gets right back to business. She realizes they weren't just making clones, but were actually tweaking and buffing the monsters to make them way stronger as they went. Ritz shouts from the back, asking what that even means, so Lapis explains that this research was designed to keep goblins exactly as they are while making them insanely strong. She asked if they noticed anything weird about that massive mob chasing them, because even with so many enemies, there wasn't a single high-level variant, likely because the ones made here are rigged to never produce anything else. It makes sense they stuck to the basic models, because having hobgoblins or goblin mages pop up would have just been a massive waste of time for their experiments. Ritz is still pretty nervous and asks if it's really okay for them to get that massive, but Lauren isn't stressed at all, saying that no matter how big they grow, a goblin is still just a goblin. But then it hits him, and he asks if that goblin actually slipped through a crack in the nest to get outside, especially since there was totally a magician waiting there. Lapis thinks it over for a second and realizes those genetic upgrades probably only work while they're stuck inside the ruins. She's positive that breaking out into the real world is exactly what let them finally start evolving. Lapis keeps going, telling the squad that no matter how you look at it, this place is totally some kind of experimental lab, and she figures these monsters were just chilling in a deep sleep for ages until someone finally showed up and flipped the power back on. It's hard to tell if they actually broke a seal or if just walking through the front door was enough to wake the whole place up. Lauren is totally locked in and asks her to explain why things are going to get so much worse if they don't shut it down fast. Lapis explains that those giant black goblins are actually super buffed versions of the normal ones, but even though they were built right here in this lab, they're acting totally bizarre, so Ritz asks her what the deal is. Lapis drops the truth and tells them straight. These ruin-born goblins don't even need humans to make more of themselves. Now she's thinking there's a hidden spot in the ruins where they're just pumping out basic goblins to use as lab rats. Since these modified monsters don't need to reproduce the old-school way, they probably just ended every female adventurer they got their hands on. That's why the black goblin is acting so weird, because it kept hunting Nim and was straight up trying to rip her clothes off for some reason. Lauren looks totally stressed out as Lapis glances over and asks if he's noticed anything yet. She realizes these goblins are hunting women even though they don't need them to make more babies, which means they're definitely up to something way creepier, so she's got a theory that these monsters are actually made of human parts, specifically the members of Ritz's party who went missing here. Lauren looks totally freaked out, asking if you can even call a monster like that a goblin anymore. Lapis says it's still a total goblin, arguing that since they don't call human-born ones half-goblins, those human parts don't change what it is at all. That's why she's freaking out, because this whole place was built just to level up and power up the entire goblin race. The scariest part is that this place actually made these monsters as smart as humans, so now they're learning and adapting to everything. Lapis brings up those goblins they saw grabbing their dead buddies earlier, and Lauren finally starts to see the big picture, but she spells it out anyway. They're recycling those bodies to build new ones, and the lab uses that experience to make every new batch even stronger. And if they let this cycle keep going, there's no telling how crazy dangerous these things will actually get. Lapis says a dragon-skinned goblin is bad enough, but one that's smart enough to use human skills is a straight-up nightmare. She leaves everyone wondering what would happen to the world if these things were actually set free. Lauren asks if they can just put these ruins back to sleep, but Lapis admits she isn't a total expert on every little thing. Lauren stays quiet, but he's totally thinking that things would go way faster if she just had all the answers. Lapis gets super defensive, insisting that every ruin is built differently, and it's definitely not because she skipped her homework. She grabs his arm and tells him he's being super rude for making a face like that. Lauren wonders what kind of look he had on his face before she finally asks where they're even headed. The Elapists think they should go search the private rooms where the ancients used to live. There's a huge chance they'll find the boss or even a secret guidebook for the whole place hidden in there. Lauren asks if people actually lived here, and Lapis explains that even though they had teleportation, it cost way too much mana to use for a daily commute. Lapis explains that teleporting every day burns way too much mana, so staying on site is the only way, and Lauren admits he never even thought about the cost. She says it's way smarter to just live right at the lab to keep things simple, and when Lauren asks if that's for real, she tells him it's 100% the truth. She's 100% sure there's a secret living area for the staff and researchers tucked away somewhere in these ruins. Lapis is hitting those rooms to find a way to shut the facility down, but she casually mentions she's also going to grab any loot she finds along the way. Lauren warns her to stop being so loud about her plan to loot the place, but Lapis just shrugs it off, saying the owners have been dead for hundreds of years, so it's not even stealing. And even though Lauren isn't totally sold, he decides to just roll with it. He points out a massive problem. If the ancient people were the ones who actually shut this place down themselves, then there's a huge chance all the important gear was packed up and moved out forever ago. Lapis realizes he's totally right, because if the place was cleared out, those manuals they need are probably long gone. Lauren asks what they're going to do if they find absolutely nothing, but Lapis just stares him down and asks what he thinks their next move should be. Lauren's head is spinning because more goblins are definitely coming, but Chuck is basically dead weight since he's completely out of mana. He knows Ritz and Nim can still handle themselves, but his own gear is a total disaster. He's seriously stressing out because he knows his weapon is on its last legs and might break at any second. He shows her the sword and warns her it's gonna snap after just a few more kills, so Lapis asks if he's looking for a new one yet. Lauren just sighs and says he'll deal with that problem later since finding info is the main goal, and Lapis totally agrees as she starts tapping away at the terminal. She says they finally made it to the residential district, and right then, a door nearby lets out a loud beep and clicks open. Lapis doesn't waste a single heartbeat, yelling that she's taking everyone out as she charges through the entrance while staying low. Lauren looks at the disaster of a room and asks if it's even safe from traps, but she claims she's basically a pro at exploring ruins. She tells him to just kick back and let her handle the search, looking way too hyped to see what's hidden in all that junk. Lauren and Ritz are just standing there totally lost, and Lauren asks what's up while Lapis starts chucking books and gear everywhere like a maniac. Lapis chucks a bunch of old papers away, complaining that she hasn't found a single useful thing in the whole pile. She heads straight for the next room while the guys just stand there and watch her go. Lauren watches more junk crash down and tells them to just let her handle it since she's the real expert here. Nim looks at the ancient walls and tells Ritz that this is exactly where the people from the Old Kingdom used to live. Ritz grabs a piece of old tech and realizes that every single thing in this room is actually part of that ancient legacy. He asks if they can just grab the item and head home, figuring it's plenty of proof to show they actually finished the job. Checking out these ruins was the whole point of the mission anyway, and Lauren is totally down for the plan. Lapis doesn't even look up from her book, saying she's cool with the plan as long as everyone actually makes it back alive. Ritz tells the squad they should all get out of there and report what they found, since it's better to let the high-ranked pros handle this while things are still quiet. Lapis just looks up and asks if he's talking about bringing in the big guns, like gold or even mithril rank adventurers. Lapis stares into the distance, wondering how long it even takes for a message to reach those big shots way up there. Ritz looks down, sounding totally unsure as he starts breaking down how this whole system actually works. Lauren finds out just how insane these top ranks are, where gold is super rare and anything higher is basically just a legend. Lapis turns her back, telling the crew she won't stop them if they want to bail, and that she'll just pray they make it home safe. She scans the whole place for what she needs, but since it's not there, the rest of the squad starts heading out. She stays behind to mess with the control panel on the wall, and Lauren calls her out for being totally cold to the rest of the group, but she just looks back and says there's no point in dragging people along if they don't even want to be there. Lauren follows her into this massive library packed with old books, but he stops dead in his tracks when he spots something, and he asks Lapis if it's a done deal now that he's stuck following her through these ruins. Lapis doesn't even look his way. She just starts explaining how everything went down. Lapis glances back, sounding a bit nervous as she asks Lauren if he's actually coming with her. Lauren just gives her a chill smile, saying he's already way too deep into this to even think about turning back. Lapis's face instantly lights up with relief as she tells him she's so happy to hear that. She admits that even with her skills, trying to clear these ruins solo would have been a total nightmare. She tosses him a quick thanks and starts digging through the old papers she found on the floor. Lapis tells Lauren she's got some great news, but he just gives her a major side-eye and asks what's going on. She holds up a dusty book with a confident smirk, revealing she actually found the instruction manual for these ruins. He points out that it even lists the exact steps to put the whole facility back to sleep the right way. Lauren is totally caught off guard and asks if she can seriously read that wild ancient script. Lapis just keeps on reading, casually reminding him that since she's a priestess for the god of knowledge, this is basically her whole job. Lauren is super impressed by Lapis's reading skills and asks if everyone serving the god of knowledge is this much of a genius, so Lapis just flashes him a massive, confident grin and points to herself, claiming she's definitely one of the smart ones. Lauren looks down at the ancient manual in her hands and asks what the actual game plan is. Lapis finds a map in the book and points out a control room where they can flip a switch to shut the whole place down, so she says they need to move out right now. Ritz watches them from a distance and calls out, asking if they finally found what they were looking for. Lapis confirms they got super lucky and found it, while Lauren turns to Ritz to ask what his squad's next move is. Ritz doesn't waste any time and tells the crew he's definitely sticking with them after all. He finally admits that sticking with Lauren and Lapis is their only real shot at making it out of here alive. Lapis flashes a smirk and takes the lead, telling everyone to hurry up and reach that control room before things get even crazier. Ritz tags along, already thinking about what's going to happen once they finally reach their destination. The narrator says this whole crazy mess is finally wrapping up, and Lauren flashes back to his first day as a total rookie, signing up at the guild alongside another new guy. He remembers the receptionist calling out the name Ritz, and for some reason, it just totally stuck in his head. They barely even spoke, but Lauren kept hearing that Ritz was totally crushing her with way better reviews for the same exact work. Everyone was talking about how Ritz was totally crushing his missions and always stayed one step ahead of him. He had to watch Ritz climb the ladder and hit silver rank first, but that was a total mistake. Lauren finally realized he couldn't run from the truth anymore. He's totally convinced that Ritz is his ultimate rival for life, but then Kurtz leans in and asks Ritz if Lauren is still totally obsessed with him, making Ritz snap and tell the old man to shut up. Seeing how everything went down, Lauren is actually super glad he randomly ran into them. The receptionist says some ruins were just found near Iron Village, and to get the job done fast, they want 2 silver-ranked teams to tackle it together. She says the total reward money depends on whatever they manage to find during the investigation. Lauren realizes this is his big chance to finally settle the score and prove once and for all who's actually the strongest. Ritz steps up and introduces himself as the leader, acting like a total professional. Lauren's getting pretty ticked off by how chill this guy is, so he tells himself he's got to stay calm and keep that same energy. Out of nowhere, Naren just snaps and starts screaming that she can't believe what's going down. She's totally fangirling over meeting the real Ritz in person, while Lulun just smiles and says it's a crazy coincidence, but then Naren isn't done yet, so she turns to Nim and asks if she's really that legendary elf everyone hypes up for being so pretty. Lulun bows to Kurtz and tells the old man he's heard all about his legendary magic skills before taking off. Ritz is left standing there totally lost, wondering how these guys even know who they are. This old dude in armor says they've heard stories about Ritz's crew for ages, so it was super easy to spot them. But then Naren jumps in with a huge grin, telling them that their own leader is actually a massive fan of theirs. She's hyping everyone up, telling Ritz that Lulun is his #1 fan, while Lulun is just standing in the back looking totally dead inside. Lulun finally snaps and starts screaming, asking who the heck she thinks she's calling a fan. He goes on a total rant about how they're just rivals since they all started at the same time, but after getting teased for low-key stalking them, he tries to play it cool by saying they're just competition for this one mission. He leaves Naren pouting and explains she just wanted everyone to be buddies now that they've finally met the legendary team from all those stories. Lauren clicks his tongue, super annoyed that his big chance to look like a total boss just got completely ruined. Lapis switches things up and looks around, mentioning that whoever ran this place actually seemed like a pretty cool person. She flips through an old book and points out there are 0 annoying riddles or weird items you have to find just to unlock a door. He tells Lauren that the people who built this place make puzzles so annoying you'll want to grab them by the shirt and start swinging. Lapis leans in with a massive smile and pats Lauren on the arm, asking him if things are actually like that. Lauren just stares at her, wondering where on earth she's seen ruins like this before, but he decides to let it go since he knows her answer would be totally nuts anyway. While they keep moving, Lapis casually says she just read all that in a book, but Lauren gives her a dry response like he's not buying it at all. She doubles down and swears she actually read it, but Lauren just gives a lame answer to shut her up while they keep walking. Ritz looks totally stressed as he tells the group to quit stalling and lead the way. They've got 0 clue when more goblins are going to jump out and attack them. He's seriously about to lose it, muttering under his breath about how he ended up with such a trash job. Lauren's just watching from the sidelines, and honestly, he's starting to feel pretty bad for the guy. It was only supposed to be a quick scouting mission before they walked right into this total nightmare of a room. Lapis looks back and tells them they're the ones with the worst luck for walking straight into this disaster. Lauren asks if she's reading his mind, but Lapis just tells him his face is giving everything away. She tells him he seriously needs to watch out, then just moves on to something else as they keep going. Honestly, Ritz and his squad are the ones with the worst luck ever for even trying to compete with them. Nim stays silent while Lauren admits Lapis is totally right about Ritz's crew being in huge trouble. Their footsteps echo loudly against the stone floor, so Lapis tells the crew they need to stop talking and stay quiet. They finally made it to the spot, and now they're standing right in front of this massive stone wall that's totally covered in cracks. Lapis tells everyone it's time to head inside, and right on cue, the massive gear door starts rumbling open. Lauren stares at the massive machine and sighs, finally admitting the whole setup is actually pretty insane. Lapis tells him to save the praise for later as they both step into the dark entrance. He wraps it up by saying they still have to face whatever's waiting for them at the top of those stairs. Lapis points to the main control panel and explains that this thing basically runs everything in the ruins. Lauren stares at the crazy-looking machine and asks if she even knows how to work it. She just tells him straight up, acting like it's the easiest thing in the world. Lauren keeps a lookout and spots doors on both sides of the entrance. Lapis tells him to just chill and let her take over because she's got this whole thing under control. She starts hitting the buttons, but then she just freezes up and sounds totally lost. Lauren's totally confused, asking what's happening and what those creepy red letters on the screen are all about. Lapis managed to get the system online, but it's straight up ignoring her command to stop. She swears she didn't mess up the controls, but she says the whole thing just feels super sketchy. Lauren's left wondering why it's stuck since she followed every single step perfectly. Lapis takes one look at the machine and says she tried her best, but it's so old it might just be total junk, and if the hardware is fried, she's completely out of options. Lauren notices the screen glitching out and tells her it's suddenly covered in red text, asking what the heck is happening to the machine. Lapis finally catches on and asks him if this place is actually supposed to be a research lab. She points out that labs like this are usually crawling with workers, and Lauren totally agrees. She points out that every staff member is already in the system, and Lauren asks where she's even going with this. Suddenly, the doors on both sides of the room just burst wide open. Lauren is totally on edge and demands to know what's happening as the whole room starts to shift. Lapis tells him the biometric scan failed, and Lauren just repeats it back to her because he has absolutely no clue what that even means. Lapis explains that only registered users can touch this gear, and since she's not on the list, the system totally ignored her command to stop. Lauren is totally lost until Lapis explains those red letters were just a warning that she didn't have permission to touch the console. Lapis admits she totally missed the warnings and just kept mashing the stop button on the machine like crazy. Since she messed up 3 times in a row, the whole console is totally locked down, and she says things are about to get way worse. Lauren just stares her down and asks why she's making such a big deal out of it. Lapis gives him a shaky smile and explains that the system flagged them as intruders, which just set off the entire facility's defense mode. This sends Ritz into a total panic, and they start yelling that they've got to fix this huge problem right now. Lauren is still totally lost with all the tech talk and tells her to quit the jargon and just say what's actually going down. Right then, Nim jumps in and says the ruins see them as total trash that a pack of goblins needs to throw away. Lapis tells them the exit is totally blocked and the room is now hooked up to the Goblin factory, so they've got to take down whatever comes through. Ritz has no choice left, so he grabs his sword and gets ready for things to get really messy. Lapis says sorry for the total disaster and promises she'll do whatever it takes to trick the system into shutting down. Lapis starts messing with the controls, explaining that if she can just trick the system into letting them in, it won't even matter how many goblins are out there. While she's hacking into the tech, she warns the squad she'll be a total sitting duck and completely wide open for an attack, that makes Ritz totally snap, and he screams at her, asking where she even learned to do stuff like that. Lapis just flashes him a massive grin and says it's all because she's a priestess for the god of knowledge. Lauren isn't buying the fake act for a second and tells her straight up that her title isn't a free pass to do whatever she wants, but she just stares him down and swears she hasn't told a single lie since the moment they got there. Lauren knows she's totally right, but she tells her to just drop it and get back to work on the machine. He grips his massive sword and tells the squad they just need to buy her as much time as they can. This gets Lapis totally hyped, and she tells the squad she's counting on them to watch her back while she does her thing. Ritz tells the old man Kurtz to go stay with Lapis since he's out of magic, and the old guy just apologizes for being totally useless. Nim shouts that the enemies are finally here, and the whole squad locks in while Ritz grips his sword. He grits his teeth and calls those monsters total pests, knowing they have no choice but to fight, and luckily that tiny door is giving them a huge advantage. He starts barking orders, telling Nim to guard the tech while Chuck covers them with his bow, and even though Chuck grumbles, he tells him to shut up since they're in the middle. Ritz is already shouting across the way, telling Lauren he's totally counting on him to handle things over there. Lauren gives a quick, chill response while keeping his eyes locked on the road ahead. The whole gang scatters and sprints to their positions, rushing to get set before the battle even begins. Ritz charges in first, busting through a stone wall with his shield and diving straight into the room. Out of nowhere, this massive, jacked goblin in a shredded shirt pops up and growls that the little pests are finally here to fight him. Lauren just steps up with his massive sword, tells the squad to leave this big guy to him, and then he slams into the monster so hard that a massive shockwave rips through the entire area. Lauren lands a massive hit right on the goblin's arm, sending the monster flying back. The monster tries to strike back with a huge overhead swing, but Lauren just stands his ground and catches the punch right on his massive sword. He feels the handle vibrating and realizes his sword is finally about to snap. Chuck watches the whole thing go down and thinks it's insane. Then he quickly shouts over to Lapis to see how she's doing. Ritz is totally feeling the heat, screaming over all that noise to ask how much longer this job is going to take. Lapis doesn't even look up from her work, just telling him she's already doing everything she possibly can. She snaps back that she's literally hacking into an ancient ruin, so thinking she'll be done in 2 minutes is just straight up wild. She's glued to the tech and thinks she can wrap the whole thing up in way less than an hour. Nim snaps that they're running out of time since she's almost out of arrows, and Kurtz warns that his magic is about to tap out too. Chuck keeps hacking away at the crowd, swearing under his breath because it feels like these guys just won't stop coming. Lauren's already dripping sweat as the fight drags on, and he's starting to think these guys are getting way stronger. But maybe he's just tripping. Just behind the front line, he spots a goblin hauling a massive sack and realizes they're actually cleaning up the battlefield, leaving him totally confused why they'd bother picking up their dead right now. Lapis keeps working and explains that they're taking those bodies because they're actually super valuable materials for the ruins. She looks back looking totally stressed and tells the guys this isn't just some simple collecting. They seriously have to stop them from hauling those bodies away. Yaret screams back that they don't have a second to spare because just holding back this wave is taking every last bit of strength they've got. Lauren asks her what the real reason is and why stopping the body retrieval is such a huge deal. Lapis reveals they're recycling these bodies to make new ones, and they're even using the dead guy's data to build way stronger versions. She explains it's all about combat data, so the more goblins they wreck, the more the system learns how to make the next batch even more deadly. She checks the manual and says that once the body is good to go, it only takes a few seconds for the system to upload all that new experience. Things get way worse when she points out this room is hooked right up to the production floor, meaning those upgrades are going to show up fast. Lauren grips his sword tight, realizing these goblins are just going to get stronger and keep on coming. Lapis explains that once the system learns enough from the regular mobs, it starts cranking out these super strong reinforced versions. And it's totally working, because a goblin actually blocks an arrow with its shield, showing they're learning way too fast. Ritz catches on instantly and shouts that the way they're using their weapons has totally changed. He screams in total frustration because he can't believe these upgraded models are already popping up this early in the raid. Ritz is non-stop complaining about how annoying these smart goblins are, but Lauren stays dead silent and keeps her eyes glued to the front. Lauren sees this massive buff goblin stepping up and realizes the super strong ones have finally reached his side too. The massive beast slams its giant club down to crush him, but Lauren barely gets his sword up in time to block the hit. He ducks right under that massive swing as it whistles past his head, and then he moves in fast. He snaps back into his fighting stance and keeps his eyes glued to the monster, waiting for it to make the next move. Lauren's sweating and looks totally fed up as he realizes these goblins are nothing like the weak ones he's used to. He realizes their skin is way tougher now and their movements are on a whole different level. He stares down the massive beast, his face getting super intense as he starts to say. He calls out the goblin, asking if it seriously just had the nerve to laugh right in his face. Lauren keeps pushing, asking the monster if it's seriously trash-talking him and calling him weak just because he's a human. He just stands there in total silence for a second, then lets out a quick breath and drops right into a fighting stance. That goblin just keeps smirking like he's already won, so Lauren totally snaps and screams at the monster to stop messing with him. He dashes forward with an insane horizontal swing that lights up the whole area as it hits, and he puts every ounce of strength into one massive swing and sends that monster flying. They're locked in a crazy back-and-forth battle as sparks and rubble fly everywhere. Lauren and the monster slam into each other, setting off a massive flash of light that covers everything. That totally blindsides the goblin while Lauren keeps herself on the move. Lauren doesn't budge an inch while a massive shockwave sends everything else flying. Chuck is sweating buckets watching the fight, wondering what the heck is even going on. It's exactly like those wild rumors he heard before, but Nim snaps at them to quit gawking and finally start acting like the silver ranks they're supposed to be. She looks over with a totally serious face and warns him that things are actually getting dangerous. That giant sword Lauren's swinging looks like it's finally gonna snap. Lauren grabs her beat-up sword as someone lets out a massive scream of total shock. Ritz shouts for Lapis to get her attention while everything around them is going absolutely wild. Lapis is totally cracking under the pressure at the terminal, screaming that she knows exactly what's going down, but there's a massive problem. She already ordered the base to shut down and freeze the goblins, but the very last command to turn off the main computer is totally stuck. Ritz is left standing there totally lost, wondering what that even means for what they're dealing with right now. Lapis completely loses it and screams that the machine she's working on just won't stop running. If this one piece just shuts down, it'll trigger a chain reaction that silences the ruins, stops the goblins, and makes the whole place just fall apart on its own. Ritz gets this look on his face and asks if they can just solve the whole thing by smashing the device to bits. Lapis snaps back and tells him to go for it if he's really that confident. She yells that this isn't just some random piece of junk, because it's been running perfectly for hundreds of years without anyone even fixing it, so breaking it would totally shut the system down, but pulling that off is going to be way harder than it looks. Ritz doesn't care about any of those boring details and just tells Lapis to get out of his way. Ritz slams his sword into the machine and screams about how freaking tough the metal is. Lapis explains that the whole surface is covered in a protection spell, so it's not going to break from some weak, half-hearted hit. She tells them straight up that without a legit magic sword, breaking this thing is basically impossible. Ritz ignores the warning and goes for it, but his sword instantly shatters against the metal, leaving him totally defenseless. Actually, looking at the input, Ritz, he's just standing there gasping for air and staring at his busted handle in total shock. Lapis is totally freaking out because the system won't shut down, while Ritz is still dead set on just smashing the whole thing to pieces. Lapis dares him to step up if he's really that tough, but he just keeps whining about how the metal is way too hard to break. Suddenly, Lauren's voice rips through the noise, screaming at Lapis to get away from that console right now. He doesn't even wait for her to speak and just bolts toward her at full speed. Lapis is totally caught off guard and starts panicking to get out of the way before he reaches her. Lapis stares at the ground in total shock, suddenly freezing in her tracks when she spots something that stops her dead. She spots a weird stone on the ground and realizes it's actually a piece of gear from a goblin mage. She realizes it's actually a mana-lost necklace that drains magic power, which explains why everything is going totally insane right now. Lauren catches on fast and figures that since it's been sitting in that nest for so long, it's probably overflowing with stored-up mana, so he clenches his jaw and gets ready to jump in before things get way out of hand. Ritz is losing it. He stares at his broken blade on the floor and screams at it to move like it's actually going to listen. Kurtz is completely shook as the energy shifts, asking if the machine's protection spell just straight up vanished. But while they're totally distracted, a massive pack of goblins suddenly swarms out of the shadows with their weapons ready. Chuck spots them and totally freaks out, screaming that the goblins are right on top of them and they're in serious trouble. That broken sword is just lying there, leaving the whole squad totally helpless against the massive mob charging their way. Lauren pours every bit of strength into one last move, yelling for the item to break as he smashes it. He shatters the rock with a massive hit, but he's totally out of breath and doubled over as the monsters close in, but then everything flips when that massive swarm of goblins suddenly loses all their power and just face plants into the dirt like heavy rocks. While the whole squad stands there completely stunned, Ritz asks if the monsters actually just stopped moving, totally unable to believe his own eyes. They're actually safe now, and as one of them realizes they can move again, they figure out the magic blast missed them because the range was way smaller than they thought, which was Lapis gets super lucky when she realizes that hiding in the back saved her from getting hit. She's grinning at how everything worked out and tells Lauren she's super impressed he actually pulled off that plan while under so much pressure. Lauren is standing there drenched in sweat and looking totally gassed, and just as he tries to say something, Lapis isn't letting him slide, and she totally grills him for pulling such a dangerous stunt without any warning. He tries to walk away, but his legs finally give out and he collapses from being totally wiped out. Lapis screams for Lauren right as his body finally gives out and he faceplants straight into the dirt. Ritz is just standing there while his teammate points out the situation and tells him he's got to see this. Just look at this. Ritz is totally speechless, staring at the mess in complete shock because he can't believe how it all ended. But then, Lauren finally opens his eyes to find Lapis right there, smiling like crazy and telling him she's so glad he's finally awake. Lauren's just trying to chill in bed, but Lapis is sitting right on his stomach reading a book like she owns the place. She acts like it's totally normal, but Lauren isn't having it and just reaches up to flick her right in the forehead. She's clutching her head in pain while he calls her out, telling her she can't just go around sitting on random guys like that. Lapis acts like it's no big deal and tries to defend herself by saying there was nowhere else to sit, but Lauren isn't buying it at all, pointing out that even without a chair, she could have just used the empty spot on the bed instead. Lapis doesn't even use him as a pillow. She just turns away and pouts, complaining that the bed is rock hard and totally hurting her butt. Lauren slowly opens his eyes, looks around the room, and asks where he is and if he's in a hospital. Lapis leans over him to confirm they're definitely in a hospital, and asks if he wants the scoop on everything that happened after he passed out. She leans in close and asks him how much of that crazy fight he actually remembers. Lauren tries to remember, but says his memory goes totally blank right after he chucked his massive sword at that machine. Lapis tells him his brain is working perfectly, and that his massive freakout was actually the right kind of rage. That totally catches him off guard, so he asks her if there's actually a difference between a good or bad way to snap. Lapis flashes a smile and says, duh, but she quickly switches gears to what went down right after he chucked his sword. Back at the guild, the AWA staffer checks out their paperwork and thanks them for the full report on those ruins. The official tells them they did an awesome job and says they can go snag their reward money at the window right next to them. He glances back at the board for a second and tells them there's one more thing they really need to know. Back at the counter, the receptionist checks the tags and confirms they definitely belong to that silver rank party who took the same job. She explains they were a 4-man squad and is just about to drop the leader's name while Lauren stares at that busted, dirty metal tag. The staff member looks totally bummed out, saying she really hopes they find the rest of his gear when they search the area again. She packs everything away and tells Ritz and the guys that the guild will take care of the rest of the paperwork. Later, Ritz stares up at the sky, thinking about how he finally knows the names of the crew that went missing. He finally admits that he really wanted to hear those names straight from their own mouths, instead of just reading them in some report. He tries to shake off the heavy vibes and switches the topic to the case they just finished. Ritz scratches his head and admits they found zero loot, so after paying for gear and hospital bills, they're actually totally broke. So Oxy looks over with a small smile on her face and tells him that even if they're out of cash, they're still one big win. The craziest part is that every single person in the squad actually made it back home alive after all that chaos. Kurtz closes his eyes with a peaceful smile, admitting he's just super happy he actually got to meet those two. Ritz zones out for a second like he just had a massive realization and says that now that he's thinking about it, he's still losing it over how Lawrence fought in that control room, saying it felt like watching a total legend come to life. Ritz starts telling this old legend about a warrior who moves as smooth as the wind. He says the rumors are real. Once that wind blows through, it leaves everything behind in total shreds. Ritz notices Lauren looking super intense with that head bandage and starts thinking, could this guy really be the legendary mercenary known as the Severing Wind? He quickly shakes the thought away, telling himself there's no way a legendary mercenary would be hanging around as a low-level copper rank. He's still feeling super sketched out because it's just weird for so many people to be this strong, especially since Lauren was the only actual mercenary. Lapis pipes up and tells the guys that if they have enough energy to sit around gossiping, they should be fixing their wounds, right before someone suddenly screams out in pain. She's standing there looking super chill, just moving the conversation right along to the next part. Lapis says her commands to the ruins worked like a charm, and since the control panel was totally trashed, the security lock finally popped open. She grins and says the ruins are basically trash now, making Lauren look up and ask if she's actually serious. Lapis points out the device is totally trashed, explaining that the necklace's power literally erased the magic circuits, and that modern magic isn't even on the same level as this tech. She mentions Ritz and his squad were actually complaining about that minor rule, but she's pretty sure they were just messing around. Lauren finally realizes that since their target is totally worthless now, it makes sense why their paycheck is so small. Lapis admits the whole job was a massive flop with zero progress. But hey, at least they still walked away with a fat stack of cash. Lawrence sighs, saying that even with the cash, the whole situation was still a massive mess for everyone. He figures he's got to find Ritz and apologize later, while Lapis just stands there watching him totally freak out. She keeps quiet, but she's already thinking that getting mixed up with Ritz's weird crew is going to be a massive problem later on. Then they talk about the ruins, where Lapis says one last team is going in for a final look before the entrance is sealed shut forever. Lapis says the machine is total trash now, so they can just ditch it, but she's still being extra careful just in case. Lauren's all patched up and just gives a nod, knowing the mission is officially a wrap. He stares up at the ceiling, asking who the heck dragged him all this way and what hospital they even landed in. Lapis just stares him down and tells him straight up that she's the one who hauled him all the way back. She says she couldn't really ask Ritz and his crew for backup since they were already swamped taking care of their own wounded guys, even though they were a huge help at the start, and she tells him they're just taking a break in the town of Kaffa. Lauren tells her he seriously owes her one for dealing with all that crazy trouble. Lapis just grins and tells him not to sweat it, especially since their goblin quest is already a total fail anyway. She points out that 3 of their friends are dead, the nest is still crawling with monsters, and they don't even have proof of the goblins they actually took out. Lauren looks totally shook and immediately asks what happened to that bag of ears they collected. Lapis spots the ripped leather pouch and figures it probably fell off during the scrap, leaving Lauren to mumble curses about losing all that sweet loot. She explains that after he blacked out, Ritz had no choice but to focus on getting everyone out of there as fast as possible. Ritz warned them that the coast wasn't clear yet, so hanging around to scavenge for loot was totally out of the question. Lapis reminds him they're totally out of time and options, especially with all those goblins swarming the second the main order stopped. Lauren says they could have just grabbed any random thing nearby to show the guild, but Lapis straight up admits she saw the proof, but ditched it on purpose because it was just dead weight slowing her down. It finally hits Lauren, and he's losing his mind because they survived all that craziness just to end up with absolutely no money. He's lying there with his head all wrapped up, finally admitting that after how insane things got, he's lucky to even be alive. He starts flashing back to everyone they lost, especially Sarf and the rest of the squad. He knows they were total idiots, but they were actually good guys, and losing them like that still hits him hard. Lauren stares at the ceiling, feeling totally guilty for dragging Lapis into this absolute disaster. She was the one stuck taking care of him, but she just gives him a sweet smile and says it's honestly no biggie. She tries to stay positive, saying that if there were any girls left in that other group, the rescue team probably already found and saved them. Lapis reminds him they were only fighting basic goblins, so there's a real chance some people actually survived. After things get quiet for a second, she switches it up and tells him they need to talk about something totally different. She points out that even though they got zero cash for that whole mess, they've still got a massive pile of bills to pay. Lauren looks totally stressed, but then she drops a bomb. She already paid the carriage fee using money she swiped from his own wallet. Lauren looks like he's about to snap, especially when she tells him the hospital bills are a whole other nightmare. She says she's got his back for now, so he catches his breath and asks exactly how long he's been out of the fight. Lapis realizes it's been 3 days total, counting that whole day of travel and the 2 days he spent stuck in the hospital. Lapis keeps that big grin on her face while she crunches the numbers, telling Lauren the whole thing costs 5 silver coins. Lauren lets out the biggest sigh of his life, but then she just brushes it off like it's totally fine. She leans right over him while he's still on the ground and tells him to stop stressing about the money because she's not just lending it to him the normal way and even promises 0 interest, but Lauren points out he's way too broke to pay her back anyway. Lapis doesn't stop there, promising she won't even bug him for the cash, and is totally cool with him paying her back in small bits over time. Lauren stares her down, feeling like something is totally wrong, and asks her point blank if this deal is just way too good to be true. Turns out she has a massive secret reason for being this nice, and the truth is actually crazy. She actually looked after him alone on purpose, just so he'd end up totally broke and stuck relying on her for everything. She knows using money to trap someone is a total low blow, but she honestly doesn't care as long as it gets the job done. She gulps hard and tells him she doesn't want his cash, because there's something else she's after. Lapis gets right in Lauren's face with a super intense look and asks him to just travel with her for a bit. She breaks it down, saying that as a duo, they're an official party, which keeps the creeps away and makes them look way more legit to anyone hiring adventurers. She explains that even with her insane demon strength, a girl traveling solo as a priestess is basically a total magnet for trouble, so she leans in super close to tell him he's actually got serious talent. But here's the biggest thing. Even though the whole world hates demons, Lauren didn't change one bit after finding out the truth and never treated her like a monster. She tells him that more than anything, there's a massive reason why she wants him specifically. He's the only person she can really trust now since he's the one who saved her life. She's sure that if he just stops stressing about the money, having a priestess on the team is going to be a huge boost for his career. Lapis stares him down, waiting for an answer, and asks him straight up what he thinks about the whole deal. Leaving, Lauren just lies there staring up at her, finally admitting he's in no spot to turn her down. Lapis leans in close, looking super hyped as she asks if he's finally saying yes to her proposal, and Lauren yells back, telling her she better promise to stay right there until that massive debt is finally paid off. Lapis lights up with a massive grin and tells him she's totally down for that deal, as she officially tells Lauren that she'll be in his care from this point forward. Lauren sighs and gives in, but then she points out that she seriously needs to get off him right now. Suddenly, we see that Lapis is actually hiding a massive secret about this mission from everyone else. Standing there all alone later, she realizes this whole mission was basically a massive win for her. She flashes back to when she was hunting for the manual in the manager's office, but she actually swiped a ton of pricey jewelry and is now totally flexing about how she outplayed those thieves. She grabbed a bunch of high-level magic gear, including that one crazy necklace that literally makes all the magic in the area vanish. She giggles to herself because they've got plenty of money for the trip now, even if she feels a little bad that Lauren's debt is just going to keep stacking up. Lapis looks pretty stoked about how things went down, thinking it was totally worth all the chaos. The real adventure is finally kicking off for Lauren, a bronze ranker who used to be a mercenary but is now totally flat broke. He teams up with Lapis, a priestess who's secretly a demon just trying to figure out how the world works. Over at a nearby tavern, some guys are freaking out because another village just got completely wiped out. One of them asks where it happened, and they find out it was that northern pioneer village they'd all been hearing about. This guy grips his drink and starts venting about how the big bosses only care about grabbing more land to squeeze everyone for taxes. They keep pushing these crazy expansion plans but won't even bother to protect the farmers doing all the work. Lauren hangs back and listens to them rant about how the people in charge just grab whatever they want and leave everyone else to rot. Because let's be real, at the end of the day, cash is what's actually running the show. He realizes it's the same struggle for everyone, from regular farmers and rich nobles to mercenaries and adventurers just like him. Lauren's just staring into space, realizing he needs cash fast because things are looking super rough. He decides to just drink his troubles away, slams his cup back, and face plants right onto the table with a massive sigh. Lapis walks in and catches him in the act, asking if he's seriously been hitting the bottle since the sun came up. That catches his eye, and she says she totally gets wanting a drink after being trapped in the hospital for 2 extra days, but then she hits him with the real question. Where did he even get the money for that mug? Lauren starts sweating, realizing he might have messed up as she asks if he's already forgotten they're basically broke. This is a total nightmare for a guy who only started adventuring because his whole mercenary crew got wiped out, leaving him completely screwed. He's forced to take on these insane jobs just to survive, and that's exactly how he ended up stuck with his current partner. This girl Lapis is traveling with him, but she's secretly a demon hiding right in front of everyone. Lapis keeps nagging him about drinking on an empty stomach, but he just reminds her that he's totally broke. Lauren tells Lapis the whole meal is on him and calls the waitress over, so Lapis immediately orders an egg sandwich with absolutely no mustard. She adds a ham sandwich to the order, and as the waitress heads off, Lauren realizes Lapis is way smarter than any regular priestess. Lapis tells the waitress she's got Lauren's drink covered, while Lauren is just sitting there losing it over the fact that she can use both holy skills and demon magic. He realizes that traveling with her is actually a pretty sweet deal for a rookie adventurer, but for some reason he still feels stressed. Lauren shuts his eyes and lets out a massive sigh, wondering why he's so stressed when things aren't even that bad. He asks the waitress how much the ham sandwich is, and she tells him it's 5 copper coins, the exact same price as the egg sandwich he just bought. Reality hits him like a truck, and he just hangs his head, realizing his debt is piling up way too fast every single day. Lapis just laughs the whole thing off, telling him that if he's so worried about being broke, they seriously need to go find some work. This takes him right back to why he started, reminding him that he only became an adventurer because he was totally flat broke. He thinks back to meeting Lapis on that first job in the ruins where they almost died, and he can't believe he's still struggling after all that fighting. Lauren is totally flat broke, so Lapis is basically paying for his entire life right now. Now he's stuck traveling with her until his debt is cleared, and even though the food at this guild tavern is actually fire, he starts scarfing down his food, wondering if he'll ever actually have the cash to pay her back. Lapis mentions finding some work, but she has to remind him that he's still totally weaponless. Lauren realizes she's totally right, and now she's wondering if there's even a single job he can do since he's got absolutely nothing. Lapis tells him that cleaning out the sewers is definitely off the table since that gross smell would never come off, and they're stuck traveling together, but she's definitely not hanging out with him if he smells like a literal sewer. She just smiles and says she can fix the smell if he's that desperate, so they can totally take the job if he wants. Lauren realizes that fixing her would cost way more than the actual reward, so he asks if there's anything else they can do instead. Lapis takes another big bite of her sandwich and says she's gonna have to think it over. Lapis tells Lauren to drop the serious talk and just focus on finishing their food for now. Lauren just shouts back from across the table that he didn't think he was saying anything that hard to get. Just then, some random guys at another table start whispering, telling each other to take a look at Lauren. They keep running their mouths, calling Lauren a total leech who's just mooching off some girl. They start clowning him for being a low-tier copper rank, laughing about how they're actually jealous he's got a girl buying him lunch. The dude leaning back keeps roasting them, saying he'd actually love to take those leftovers for himself. Lauren spots their tags and realizes these guys are actually iron rank adventurers. Lapis takes a sip of her drink and tells him he should probably just ignore them, but Lauren's not having it, because if you let people talk to you like that, they'll never stop treating you like a total joke. Lapis asks if that's just how mercenaries roll, even though she thinks it's totally stupid to even bother with guys like them. Lapis leans in with a sharp grin, calling them out for being salty that they can't find a girl who'd actually let them be a total leech. That instantly triggers the guys, and one of them jumps up screaming to ask what she just said. Lauren just lets out a low laugh, and suddenly his eyes look way more dangerous than before. He tells Lapis she did an awesome job baiting them out and says he's going to finish them off in a flash. Lapis doesn't even blink, just casually reminding him that murder is totally illegal, so he should probably just skip that part. She warns him that while fights are usually ignored, robbing them will get him thrown straight into jail. Lauren just mumbles a lazy answer, but Lapis warns him that if he smashes any furniture during the fight, he's totally paying for it. But then she just smiles and says she's picking up the tab so he can go all out, even though Lauren says she's totally killing the vibe. This iron-ranked jerk starts trash-talking from across the room, saying he'll let it slide if Lauren begs on the floor and hands over the girl, since a priest is always good to have around. This guy keeps running his mouth, telling Lauren her man is probably bored of her and should just hand her over to them already. One of the guys loses it and screams at Lauren to just hand the girl over already. Lauren doesn't say a single word. He just clenches his fist and gets ready to pounce. He gets launched across the room and slams into the wall, leaving a massive crater while everyone else just stands there in total shock. Lapis just sighs, thinking it's totally wild that people would say such trashy things to a lady. She actually decks the guy herself, looking totally fed up as he hits the ground. A bit later, Lapis looks at Lauren and asks if they're seriously just picking herbs, because this job is honestly a total snooze fest. Lauren tells them they don't even need gear since it's just the local forest with 0 scary monsters, but Lapis points out that at 2 copper a plant, Ahill needs 750 to pay off his debt, but Lauren tells her to shut up for totally killing the vibe. Lauren just stares at the tiny plant in his hand, looking totally lost because this is way out of his league. Lapis keeps whining about how lame everything is, so Lauren finally asks why she even bothered tagging along. Checking out the plants they just grabbed, Lapis says she seriously needs to start making her own money too. She follows right behind Lauren, teasing him that it'd be super embarrassing if she had to lend him cash, and points out he's actually missing a ton of the herbs they're looking. Lauren just grumbles under his breath, admitting that he's honestly not built for this kind of boring work. He lets out a massive sigh, thinking that if he could just land one real fight, he'd wipe out his entire debt in a flash. Lapis just smiles at him and brings up the obvious fact that even if a fight broke out, he doesn't even have any gear to use anyway. Lauren has to admit she's right, but he's still super salty because they've barely found any loot worth selling. Lapis tells him that's just how it goes, since it's a basic quest anyone can grab, so the small amount they have is actually totally normal. Lauren knows she's totally right, so she decides to just pack it up and head back to town, but then Lap stops her. Lapis starts doing the math out loud, listing off 30 copper for a room, 7 for food, and 2 for a drink, totaling about 50 copper a day just to survive. She stares at that tiny bag of herbs and realizes that even after all that grinding, they're still gonna end up losing money today. Lapis tells Lauren to just borrow more cash for better gear and a fresh start, but he knows right away that's a huge mistake. She's seriously wondering how other copper rankers even survive when the pay is this pathetic. She figures these guys get so desperate from debt that they take on high-paying jobs they can't handle, and when they fail, they just end up dead or missing. He points out that hitting iron rank is the only way to get a real team to notice him, leaving Lawrence to just sigh at how brutal this world is. Lawrence is starting to think he actually made way more bank back in his mercenary days compared to this. He finally gets that the bosses and the guys crunching the numbers were actually struggling way harder than he ever realized back then. Lapis tells him that's just how life works no matter how big the group is, but then out of nowhere, Lauren suddenly shoves the bag of herbs they found right in her face, catching her completely by surprise. Lapis asks if she's really stuck carrying all the bags, but Lauren tells her that's not the plan, and to just be quiet for a second. He stands alert and looks off into the forest, warning her that there's definitely something moving around nearby. Lauren says if there's really something out there, they should just bail, and Lapis admits he's got a point. Lauren can't shake the feeling that something is totally off, and he keeps his eyes glued to those trees. They both stop dead in their tracks when they see someone just lying there in the grass right in front of them. And it turns out to be a girl with long hair just collapsed on the ground like she's completely passed out. Lauren is completely stunned while Lapis realizes it's just a young girl standing out here all by herself. She starts wondering why anyone would even hang out in a place like this to begin with. Lauren wonders if she's just lost, but Lapis takes a closer look and sees the girl is in really bad shape. He points out she's totally barefoot, but her feet don't have a single scratch or bruise on them. Lapis notices her clothes are perfectly clean, which is super sketchy if she really walked all this way by herself. She finishes her check and realizes the girl has zero muscle and skin that's way too soft for someone who actually spends time outside. Lapis looks at the passed-out girl and points out that she looks like a total high-class lady who's been super pampered. Her presence in the middle of a forest even weirder, but Lauren's train of thought gets cut off when he senses something nearby. Suddenly, a pack of forest wolves leaps out from the trees, growling and baring their sharp teeth. They corner the group, so Lauren tells Lapis they need to clear these things out fast and save the girl. Lapis agrees, but he points out that Lauren doesn't even have a weapon. But Lauren isn't worried at all as he just cracks his knuckles and he walks right up to the pack and calls them a bunch of weak puppies he can take down with his bare hands. The first wolf leaps at her, but Lauren meets it with a punch so powerful it sends a shockwave through the air. Then he just starts wrecking the whole pack, tossing those wolves around like they don't weigh a thing. Lapis just hangs back, thinking this total beatdown looks way too familiar, while Lauren stands over the bodies and asks if the meat is even good to eat. Lapis says the meat is gross, but the skins are worth a ton of money. Too bad Lauren doesn't even have a knife to start skinning them. Lauren asks how the girl is doing, and Lapis finishes her checkup saying she can't find any visible injuries or anything out of the ordinary. Lapis flashes a smile and tells the girl she's insanely lucky, because it's a total miracle they found her before those hungry wolves could get to her. Lauren watches and says that if she's got this much good luck, some other poor guy out there is probably dealing with the exact same amount of bad luck. Lapis admits the world is totally bizarre and asks if he knows anyone like that, but Lauren just goes dead silent. Lapis asks what they're supposed to do with her now, since Lauren knows they can't just ditch her in the middle of the woods. Lauren gives a tired sigh and says he's not crazy about the idea, but they'll take her to town and let the guild handle things from there. He reaches down and gets a good grip on the girl, lifting her up to carry her back. But as he does, He gets this super weird look on his face, making Lapis stop and ask if he's holding her the wrong way. Lauren just stares at her, saying he can't believe how light she is, and starts laughing. Lapis thinks it's super sketchy too, especially since the girl looks way too fit to be that light. Lapis stares down at the girl, hunting for any little clue that might reveal who she really is. While Lauren just tells her they can ask for the full story whenever she finally wakes up. And then Lapis admits she was worried they'd look like kidnappers since it's two scary people carrying a helpless girl. But Lauren tells her to stop including him in that group. The truth is, from the second they found her in the woods, a brand new adventure had already kicked off for both of them. They make it back to the city, and Lauren is actually surprised they got through the gates without any trouble. Lapis says the guards are actually super chill unless you're a known criminal, and besides, who would ever suspect someone hanging out with a priestess of being a kidnapper? Lauren says he's impressed by how much pull her title has. Cyan, she brags that priests are in a league of their own when it comes to social trust. They finally reach the Adventurer Guild in the city of Kaffa, where the girl sits silently on a bench as a guild worker comes over to confirm the report, asking if they really found someone needing rescue out in the forest. Lauren tells them they've got the right person, and asks the staff to go ahead and handle the checkup from here. The guild receptionist with the glasses nods and says she'll take over from here, asking if she can officially take custody of the girl. The staff finally jumps in to help, telling her they've got this because they can't just leave her sitting there forever. One of the guys mentions the two of them as he picks the girl up. He's surprised by how light she is, which catches Lapis off guard. The receptionist keeps things professional and asks Lauren and Lapis if they'd mind following her back to the reception room for a moment. One of the guys carrying the girl off makes sure to clear the air, saying it's not like they're refusing to help out. But the guild isn't just taking her in without questions. Turns out there's something else they really need to talk about. They head inside and the mood gets a bit more serious as the receptionist says it's time to get to the main point, leading the group into a private room where she tells Lauren and Lapis she's going to be totally blunt with them. Lapis looks shocked as the woman explains the guild actually needs to restrict where the two of them go for a while. Lauren is completely thrown and asks what that's even supposed to mean, wondering if the guild thinks they're actually in trouble. Lapis starts getting a bit defensive, holding her hand up and telling the woman it's not what she thinks. The receptionist stays totally chill, explaining the guild needs to investigate that girl first, so Lauren and Lapis better stay put until they have a real plan. So Lapis asks if that's because there's something weird about the girl they found. The receptionist shuts it down immediately, saying she can't give them any details at this stage of the game. Lauren is totally over it and asks how long they have to follow these rules, and the lady says it'll only be a few days to get results. But then, for now, they're totally banned from leaving the city, and Aishi says it'd be way easier if they just stayed at an inn the guild picks for them. Lauren grumbles that the whole situation feels way too strict. The receptionist ignores the attitude and tells them they've already got a spot ready for them at the Gokusai Tei Inn right on the main street. Lauren just shrugs it off, saying the name of some random inn doesn't mean anything to him. Lapis, on the other hand, looks completely floored just hearing the name of the place. She turns to him and explains that this is literally one of the top 2 fanciest spots in the whole city, so it's definitely going to be insanely expensive. The receptionist jumps back in to say the guild is totally footing the bill for their rooms and all their meals. She even tells them that if they want some entertainment, they can just bill it to the guild and she'll handle it later. Lauren can't help but wonder if adventurers are always this easy to win over with some fancy bait. Lauren isn't buying any of this, looking at the receptionist and saying the special treatment they're getting is way too obvious. He was super suspicious because every merc knows that if a job offers insane money right away, it's usually a total trap. Lapis chimes in from the side, telling him he should just play along and be grateful, but Lauren snaps back that he doesn't need a lecture on feelings from her. Lapis whips back to the desk and tells the receptionist straight up that she's got a massive problem with how they're being treated, and Lauren demands to know what the deal is with that girl they rescued. Lapis backs him up, saying they aren't going to just sit around with their hands tied unless they get some answers. She looks the woman in the eye and asks for just the facts. I'm mainly how likely it is that this whole mess is going to come back to haunt them. The receptionist plays it cool and tells them there's almost no risk since the guild staff actually recognize the girl, but they're totally in the dark until she wakes up. and it's gonna take a few days before they can even figure out who she really is. Lapis starts to put the pieces together. She realizes the guild just wants to keep them nearby until they're totally sure Lauren and Lapis aren't connected to the girl's past. She flashes Lauren a huge grin and tells him the guild's plan is officially ready to roll. Lapis is grinning because once the guild confirms they aren't connected to that girl from the woods, they're totally safe, and she's mostly just hyped to live it up. But Lauren isn't exactly celebrating yet. He cuts right to the point and asks the receptionist if she's actually sorted out the money in their rooms like she said. The receptionist stays professional and says she'll get the paperwork done right away, then asks if they're down for a double room at an inn called Goku Saitai. Lauren doesn't take that well at all. He starts yelling that they obviously need 2 separate rooms and tells her the whole deal is off if she can't manage that simple request. Lapis just shrugs and says she wouldn't have minded sharing, which only makes Lauren even madder as he tells the priestess she needs to have some actual self-respect. As they head out, Lapis starts thinking out loud about the girl they found. She figures the kid is probably from somewhere far away and holds a pretty high social rank, considering, wondering how weird it is for someone like that to be found alone in a forest. She tells Lauren they might as well enjoy the fancy inn while the guild does the legwork, so she looks over at him and asks if he's feeling worn out, figuring the whole conversation back at the desk was a bit too much for him to handle. Lawrence sighs and says that's definitely part of the problem, but there's something else bothering him about how he's feeling lately. He looks at his hand, admitting his body just feels off and weak. He can't tell if he's just getting rusty or if he wasn't as focused as he thought he was. Lapis tells Lauren his body is totally fried from being sick and pushing his limits, but Lauren just stares at his hand, wondering if that's the whole story. 2 whole days pass before a guild worker finally calls them in to reveal the official results of the investigation. The lady in glasses tells them they're officially cleared to travel again, thanking them for all their help and saying they can finally get back to their normal lives, but Lapis isn't having it. She asks if that's seriously all they're getting, demanding to know why the people actually involved aren't getting a real explanation. The staff member looks down, explaining that the higher-ups at the guild have decided to keep the rest of the details under wraps. She tells them straight up that the information has been classified and only adventurers who have reached iron rank or higher are allowed to know the full story. Lapis loses her cool and starts yelling, reminding the lady that they were the ones who rescued the girl in the first place, and they deserve to know what's going on regardless of the rules. Lauren suddenly grabs her shoulder, catching her totally by surprise. Lauren apologizes to the staff member, saying his partner is a priestess of the god of knowledge and just can't stand it when people hide information from her. The worker admits she's heard that about her kind, but she stands her ground and says the decision belongs to the guild, so there's nothing more she can do. Lauren tells the lady he gets it and won't push for stuff she isn't allowed to say, but he asks if the news is public yet, hoping she can at least give him the real deal on that. The receptionist confirms it has, explaining that they've already finished picking who needs to know and have briefed them. Lauren decides she's done for now, telling her they're grabbing their freedom and heading home right after they check out of the inn. Lapis tries to protest, but the staff member ignores her and just thanks Lauren for all his help. As they walk away, Lapis looks pretty annoyed and asks why he just dropped the whole thing like that, which leads to her. She asks him if he's actually got some kind of secret plan or what. Lauren says there's no point in pushing her anymore because she's got to stay low-key, and making her break the rules would just turn into a total disaster. He says it's way too much work to make someone talk when they're told not to, so it's smarter to just find someone else who's already dying to talk. Lapis asks if he already knows who to look for, and Lauren tells her to help him out, since he knows exactly who they are and what they look like. Lapis grabs Lauren's arm like everything's totally normal, but he's super annoyed and tells her to quit it and listen up. She doesn't care though, and tells him since she has no idea where they're going, he better hurry up and lead the way. They walk into a super crowded tavern together, and Lauren has a quick chat with the lady at the front counter. He heads deeper inside and shoves open the door to the back room. Lauren finds who he's looking for, and says it hasn't really been that long, then asks if he can take the seat across from the guy. Chuck's just chilling with a drink when he gets totally blindsided, asking how they even managed to track him down. Lapis says she spent 30 copper coins just to get some info, and she's definitely putting that on the company tab. She gives him a big wave and says it's good to see him again, while Lauren just stands there watching. We watch Chuck take a slow sip of his drink, looking like he's totally given up on hiding, he waves over a waitress and tells her to grab 2 more drinks for his surprise guests. Chuck tells them he's good and doesn't need a drink, but Lauren mentions he's short on cash anyway, so Chuck just grins and says since they had his back before, the next round is totally on him. Lauren stares at the drinks and admits he feels like he barely helped, especially since the whole mission turned into a total mess. Chuck tells him not to be stupid because even if the pay was total garbage, they were lucky just to make it out alive, so Lauren says, "My bad," and drops the whole thing, so Chuck asks why they even tracked him down in the first place. He leans in and asks what they actually want from him while Lapis explains that they actually stumbled across a random girl in the forest just a couple of days ago. Chuck is totally shocked and asks if they're the ones who started that huge mess, especially since he heard the guild is calling in the big guns to deal with it. Lauren just tells him that Lapis was the one who wanted to dig up more info. It all finally clicks for Chuck, and he nods along as he realizes exactly why they showed up. Chuck kicks back and reminds them he's a silver rank pro, so he's definitely not the type to just go around spilling secrets. He says only total scrubs blab about their missions, and guys like that never even make it to silver rank. Lauren's down, but he warns that if there's cash to be made, Chuck is the only guy shady enough to sell that info. Chuck thinks it over and decides to spill the tea since Lauren helped Nim, but only if they promise to never mention his name. Lauren promises they won't cause any drama, and Lapis is already nodding her head, saying she's totally in. Chuck finally caves, but he warns them that he's not even sure if what he heard is actually real. He tells them it's their call to make and starts spilling every bit of info he's got. Maya finds out the girl they just saved is actually Sheena Lombardia from the city-state of Hansa. Lauren looks confused by the name, but Lapis explains it's a small country about 3 days south by carriage. She has no clue what the girl's name is, but she says the Lombardia family is a huge deal that basically runs the whole city. Chuck notes that Lapis is surprisingly well informed about the Lombardia family, and she just gives him a smug look, telling him he should probably praise her a bit more for knowing her stuff. Chuck keeps going with the explanation, mentioning that the girl they found, Sheena, is actually the only daughter of the guy who runs that entire city-state. He takes a drink and says her social status is so high it's actually kind of crazy, and since she's got that famous last name, the people in charge couldn't just push her around or treat her like some random nobody. Lauren just nods with a serious look, totally confused about why a girl that important was even out there in the first place. He asks the big question. If she's really that important, why were he and Lapis the ones being locked up and watched? Chuck breaks it down and says the people in charge just didn't want them running their mouths about what they saw. He explains how bad it looks for a high-class girl to be found abandoned in the woods, and if that news got out, plenty of shady people would start showing up to take advantage of it. Chuck adds that since nobody officially asked them to rescue her, there's no reward money, and they still haven't even proven she's actually the person they think she is. Lapis is losing it because her ID still isn't cleared after 2 whole days, but Chuck just shrugs and says he's just the messenger. Chuck takes another drink and mentions that while the guild staff thinks the girl is legit, the messenger they sent to her home city hasn't come back yet. Lauren just shrugs and says, it's probably because they haven't had enough time to make the trip. Lapis steps in to explain that big organizations usually give their messengers magic items to send back regular check-in signals, but it looks like the signals went totally dark, and Chuck's just grinning because the guild is freaking out about making her super powerful family mad. Since things are getting super dangerous, the guild is calling for a bunch of iron rank teams to escort her back to Hansa safely, but Chuck admits the pay is total garbage, so the silver rankers won't even look at the job, and that's when Lauren finally realizes the info wasn't a big secret. The guild doesn't usually spill secrets to low-level copper ranks like them, so Lapis stays quiet for a second before Then she looks up with a super serious expression and asks what they have to do to get themselves involved in this whole mess. Lauren asks if there's a huge reason she's so into this, but Chuck just thinks she's being her usual curious self. Lapis gets right in their faces, saying she can't stop thinking about why a rich girl who wanted for nothing would end up passed out in a forest days away from civilization. She stands her ground and says she simply can't help wanting to know the truth, leaving Lauren looking completely drained in the background. Lapis points out that since they're just copper rank, the guild isn't even going to look at them, so she suggests they find some kind of loophole to get in on the action. Lauren isn't buying it and says a trick like that is impossible, but then Chuck jumps in and says it actually works, leaving her totally stunned. Chuck explains that in special cases, a recommendation from a silver rank adventurer lets copper ranks work on jobs usually meant for the iron rank guys. He points out that since Ritz is already handling this request, it wouldn't be hard to get them recommended. If Ritz gives the green light, they can definitely squeeze into the mission. Lapis gets totally hyped and starts shouting about how great the plan is, but Lauren instantly covers her mouth to keep her quiet. Looking totally serious, Boylern asks if Chuck is really okay with this. He knows that if they screw up, it's going to trash the reputation of everyone who recommended them. Chuck just flashes a confident smirk and tells him that's not going to be a problem at all. He's pretty sure Ritz would say the same thing, but he makes it clear they're just putting the idea out there. Lauren can do whatever he wants, but if he does take the job, Bob Lauren holds Lapis back and cuts in, saying they need to make sure all their gear and weapons are ready before they even start. Lapis starts tripping over her words, trying to explain why she's being so extra, while Lauren just buries his face in his hands like he's already done with this whole situation. Lauren says sorry to Chuck and promises his gear will be ready in just one day, then asks if they're finally good to start the plan. Chuck just starts laughing at him, saying Lauren is way too soft and is basically being ordered around by the girl. Lauren tells him to shut up because he's well aware of the situation, so Chuck agrees to start the paperwork since the gear will be ready tomorrow. Chuck points out that with no silver ranks around, getting approved will be a total piece of cake, and Lauren tells him she's really counting on him to make it happen. Once they're alone, Lauren turns to Lapis with a dead serious look on his face. Then he just comes out and asks her to lend him some cash. Lapis realizes he needs the loot for gear like that massive sword, and Lauren admits he's got to buy it or he'll just be dead weight for Chuck's team. She asks when the mission finally kicks off, and Lauren tells her they've got at least 3 days to wait while they check on the girl they just rescued. They'll assume it's, will that give them enough time? Will that give Lapis enough time to get the cash? She's totally down to help, but Lauren says he's not in a position to complain and can wait, so Lapis heads out the door to start getting the funds together. With Lapis gone, Chuck swings an arm around Lauren's shoulder and tells him that since he isn't busy, he might as well stick around and grab a drink. Chuck leans back with his drink and laughs, saying they both have it rough since they've both fallen for such weird women. Lauren just looks at him and asks how the hell the conversation even got to that. Chuck admits he knows exactly what's going on, explaining that even though Nim runs him ragged, he's totally fallen for her and is even starting to like her bossy attitude and thin frame. He keeps yapping that Nim's sharp attitude is actually her best feature, so Lauren warns him that if she hears him talking like that, she'll turn him into a human pincushion on. Night's finally over and the shutters creak open as the sun rises on a brand new day. Lapis shows up and looks pretty surprised, asking Lauren if he really spent the entire night drinking in the bar, although she figures that's just how things ended up happening. Nim walks into the room with her usual stone-cold face and says she finally tracked down Chuck's secret hideout. Lapis gives her a super friendly hello and says it's been a while, but Nim just shuts her down, saying it hasn't been that long, all while Lauren and Chuck sit there looking totally... Lapis apologizes to the squad, explaining that after they split up yesterday, she totally blanked on finding a place to crash for the night. She tells Lauren not to sweat it because she's already handled everything, even moving his bag since he barely had any gear anyway. Lauren just stares at her, telling her that the whole situation sounds pretty bad for his reputation. Lauren asks how she even got into his room in the first place, so Lapis explains that she just told the staff. They were together. It worked way too easily, and Lauren wonders if the insecurity is actually garbage. He knows the guild recommended this place, so it should have some standards, but the fact that they just let her in makes him pretty worried about the whole situation. Nim looks down at the mess on the floor and tells Chuck to wake his ass up, but he's still completely passed out from drinking all night. Lapis asks if Nim came all the way here just to pick up Chuck, and Nim confirms she's there to collect that loser and get him moving. Lauren tries to act all chill about the drinking, but then he admits he was basically stuck listening to Chuck brag about his love life the entire night. Nim tells Lapis that Lauren is actually a good guy, and that she should try to learn a thing or two from him, which makes Lapis wonder out loud if she's really that much of a bad girl. Nim leaves the final choice up to them and tells them to chill, since she'll cover for Lauren by telling Ritz he was just showing his junior a good time, and she's even picking up the whole bar tab. She gives a simple goodbye and starts heading out, leaving the room with Chuck in tow. Nim drags the hungover dude out of the room while Lauren and Lapis just stand there in the quiet morning light. Lapis wonders if she should apologize later but decides against it, asking Lauren one more time if she's actually a bad person, until he finally tells her to just stop asking. Lapis wants to hit up the shopping district, so Lauren tags along as they start wandering through the streets together. She starts giving him a huge lecture about how he won't last a day without the right weapons and armor, basically saying good gear is the only way to survive, so she takes a good look at his current set and points out it's way too worn out. She says it's definitely time for a change, but Lauren mentions he's had this stuff since back when he was a mercenary. She tells him she already scouted out some gear that would look great on him. She asks him to just trust her judgment on this one as they move through the city and the two of them walk through the crowded streets while people nearby stop to watch them pass by. Lapis explains that since his fighting style involves taking quite a few hits, he really needs something way more durable than just standard leather armor. She shows him her #1 pick, which is just this long, dark coat, but Lauren isn't feeling it at all since a coat doesn't even count as armor. Lapis swears this isn't just some basic jacket, it's actually a super powerful magic tool, and she's totally flexing because she's the one who found it. This fabric is actually a special weave made from layers of black spider silk, and she tells him it's a total steal for just 5 gold coins. She explains that gear with both defense and auto repair usually costs 10 times more, so this coat is basically the steal of a lifetime. Lapis keeps talking up the coat, explaining that wearing it over his leather armor would boost his defense like crazy. She says it's a total steal, but Lauren asks what would happen if she just told the clerk, it's actually worth 10 times the price. Lapis isn't worried one bit, saying it's the shop's own fault for not knowing their stock. But just as she says it's not their problem, she stops dead and looks around. The shopkeeper at the counter looks up from his papers and gives them a pretty suspicious look. Lauren starts to look a little tense while Lapis just stands there. Lauren leans in and asks her if she thinks the guy just caught on to their plan. He's definitely starting to sweat a bit over the whole situation. Lapis just smiles and tells him not to worry since the guy hasn't noticed anything. She says, even if he does figure it out, they just need to buy it before he can change the price tags. She starts looking around the shop floor, looking pretty confused. She says it's weird because she had her eye on something specific, but now it's just gone. So she asked the shopkeeper where it went, and if someone already bought it. The old guy just scoffs and says nobody would buy such a piece of junk, so he moved it to the back to get it out of the way. Lapis sounds surprised that he even managed to move the thing, but the shopkeeper tells her it wasn't easy. He says it took a bunch of guys just to carry it into the shop in the first place. She asks if he can bring it out for them to see, but the guy tells her she's going to have to wait. He says it's not the kind of thing you can just pull out whenever you want, leaving Lauren looking over the rest of the weapons on the racks. He thinks to himself that even though the shop is small, they actually have some really high-quality gear. Lauren checks out a small blade and figures he should probably come back for a spare once he actually has some extra cash. But he realizes he has no idea when that's actually going to happen. Just as he's thinking about it, something catches his eye and he spots a massive, high-quality longsword sitting on the rack. It looks like a seriously impressive piece of gear. So some random adventurer nearby catches him and looks super annoyed for some reason. Lauren starts to reach for the sword, but the guy yells at him to get his hands off of it right now. The guy snatches the hilt away before Lauren can even touch it, claiming that he's the one who had his eye on it first. He looks Lauren up and down and says he might actually have half-decent taste in weapons for once, but he follows it up by saying a muscle brain like Lauren could never actually use a blade like this, telling him to just stay in his lane. The guy heads straight for the counter and tells the shopkeeper that he's buying the sword right then and there. Lauren's just standing there totally lost, wondering who that guy even was, but it's not like he actually had the cash to buy that sword anyway. Lapis walks over and asks if something happened, but Lauren just looks down and tells her it was nothing. He's just trying to move on from that annoying guy, but Lapis spots the empty rack and points out that someone finally bought that longsword. She says the sword was fine since she prepped it herself, but then she stops and says that's not even the real reason because he's got something way cooler to show him, and she says she found a total masterpiece that makes that other sword look like straight-up trash. And Lauren thinks to himself that while he doesn't hate her being so sure of herself, she really has a habit of saying things that will eventually get her in trouble. He grabs the edge of the heavy sheet and gives a little grunt as he pulls the cover off to see what she's talking about. And one look at the weapon has him realizing Lapis has managed to find something completely insane once again.